Greetings, greetings. All right, peace. I'm just going to wait for some people to come in. Then we will get started. Peace to Ninth Disciple. Just going to wait a minute or so we get some more people in the room. We'll get started. I'm go through a couple of quick announcements as usual before we begin. I'm going to do that in about a minute. And we will get rolling. Peace, Mama Muerte, Maeve, Ikua, Maran, Sister Trina. Matter of fact, I was about to send you an email. Send me an email. What's a good time to catch you up to speed for what you missed Saturday. So when you get a second, just shoot me an email. Times and availability. It's good to catch up on that and give you some of the information from Saturday. And I'll look at it and I'll see what lines up with my schedule, and we'll set up a call. So just send me an email. Let me know the best times to call, and then we'll get you up to speed. All right. Peace. Regina Green. All right, real quick, couple quick announcements as we waiting for some more people to come into the room. Just a reminder for this month and next month, I did send the flyer out for the event on November 30th. If you on the email list, text list, you should have got it. If you have not received it or you are not on the list and you would like to receive the flyer, to request an invite for the ritual, which will be Friday evening, November 30th at 8 p.m. And that will be the Black Mass and the Eternal Word of Set ritual. That will be our last ritual for this calendar year. We will take a break in the month of December. We will be doing something locally and private, but we'll take a break for the month of December due to, holidays and travel being kind of expensive to travel during those months, even if you don't celebrate the holidays. You got New Year's, Christmas, just a lot going on in the month of December. I know I got a lot going on in that month, so not a good month to really do anything. January, we will pick up. We got some things planned starting the new year. We will be doing, I want to put this out there, we do it once a year, and it's a in-depth ritual, the Eternal Darkness and Chaos ritual. It's an initiatic ritual. It's something that we started last year. We only do it once a year. If you are interested in that, I will start putting that out in a couple of weeks. We definitely would have to talk briefly with individuals that would be interested in getting initiated in that ritual. That will more than likely be what we kick off January with. And then we have some other things planned starting out the new year. So again, if you have not received or gotten a flyer, or you would like to request an invite, send me an email that you see in the description box, khnum19@gmail.com, and I will get that over to you. Also, if you are interested in a spiritual consultation or a reading, again, I request 2 days notice. Just send me an email. Best times and availability for you. If you can't get to me in person, it can be done via social media. I usually do it in a private Google Hangouts call, or Skype as a secondary option. I do prefer Google Hangouts. It's always a better feed. And again, I just request you at least give me 48-hour notice. Again, you can email me the same email, khnum19@gmail.com. And again, specify which one you are inquiring about or would like to make an appointment for. Understand there is a difference between a spiritual reading and a spiritual consultation. A reading is where we use a system of divination to contact the spirits, the ancestors, and whatever information comes through, we roll with it. Whereas a consultation kind of gets a free-for-all. As I've said many times before, it's something you kind of dictate the flow and the direction of how you want that to go. You can focus on specific areas, questions, on specific systems, how to do work, whatever it is. All right. All right. So, yeah, if Mama Muerte, Mandy, if you come down December, we'll be doing something private. You could definitely participate in that. I know you're gonna have the kids with you, but we'll figure it out. So yeah, any of those things, aforementioned things, feel free to hit me up at that address, canome19@gmail.com. All right, so what I wanted to go over this week, either this week or next week will probably be the last portion that I go over on this topic. There was just some information. As I said before, the book we've been going over, and I've just been jumping around. Again, I just want to put it out there. I've suggested people get this book, The Asetian Bible by Louis Marquez. It's much more, and in my estimation, and reading and studying it, even though it's vampiric in nature, it touches on a lot of high aspects of left-hand path spirituality, energy work, gets into detailed techniques of feeding, absorption. There's some good history in it, which is not really as important in my estimation than the work. But it's so much more. And there's just not enough time to go through every aspect of it. So I've just been touching the last several weeks on some key points. I would suggest, again, you get the book and put it on your to-do list as something to read and study. And there's work in there that you can do or inspire work in there that what can inspire you to create work. So I'll probably stay on it maybe one more week after this, depending on what I get through this evening. And go through as much material as I can. But as you know, it can become a little time consuming. A couple things real quick that I want to go over. Got a couple of emails the last few days. And as I said, what I try to do is sometimes it's hard to just address every individual email. It's just the time. The time isn't there to do it. So I kind of like to address some of the emails in general in a brief form like this. So there's a couple, Brother Phil, I know Brother Phil sent me an email. I did respond back, brother. Appreciate your support. And the email that you sent, I did send you a reply back. So hopefully you received that. But I still keep getting some emails, in my opinion. Now, I'm not sure who in detail. I don't know, a lot of the people that send the emails, but I get emails still where I see people struggling and stuck. So I'm not going to pass judgment on them because I don't know where they are in their studies or their journey. They could be new. Some have identified being on the path for a while. They're not technically new. Now, I don't know what qualifies somebody for being new. I think that's a matter of opinion. To me, new is somebody maybe fresh out the gate under a year or two. This is just in my experience. I think after a couple years, not saying you have to be a skilled. I'm not saying that makes you a skilled, seasoned perfectionist and knowing everything, because nobody knows everything. But the question that I pose sometimes in these dialogues and these emails I get, at what point does an individual not consider themselves new? So I say that to say, because I still get emails where people are struggling on one to be exclusive to something or to belong to something, because they don't understand when we're using the terminology path of self-mastery. They forget the key word in that sentence is self. I want to make this crystal clear. This is a path about doing the work yourself. Those that are on it know that. It doesn't mean if you freely choose. And I'm going to also apply the Luciferian mentality. And that's why when I did those Luciferian videos a few weeks back, and by nature and mindset, that's what I would describe myself as. And that's what I would tell people, the mentality. I'm not saying you have to make a physical and declaration of being anything Luciferian or whatever it might be, but you should utilize the mindset of what that represents. And I say that to say this, because I still see people struggle. I keep getting questions too about deity and archetype. People still struggling with that. And I'm going to read a brief definition because, one, I want to make this clear. I referred in response to some of those emails, I referred people to a video I did a little while back, can't remember how long ago, maybe a couple months ago, the vastness and versatility on the left-hand path. All right. The reason why I put that video out is when you want to be exclusive to something, I don't care what it is. Like, for an example, I've been on this topic for the last couple of weeks. Doesn't mean I'm exclusive to it. If you want to be strictly Palo, or you want to be strictly vampiric, or you want to be strictly dealing with ancestral worship or necromancy, or you want to be just Luciferian, that's not being on the path to self-mastery. What that basically is you're basically, when you're trying to be exclusive to a particular thing, you're basically on the path to mastering that particular system. That's it. And that's not what this is about. And I know sometimes people coming from other systems struggle because maybe they were something for X amount of years. And this is what I mean when I say sometimes it subconsciously impacts them and they're not aware of it. They kind of use that same mindset when they come over here. So they what I mean over here is on this path. So there's going to be things, as I said before, you gravitate to that you like. No doubt. There's going to be some things you pay more energy and time to, no doubt. But when you find yourself stuck on a specific thing, it's a problem because you might not be aware of some things that are bubbling to the surface subconsciously. There's some insecurities there you're not addressing. The need to be exclusive to something as a comfort zone. You may say on the surface, no, that's not why. It's because this is what I'm feeling or vibing. No, there's a reason why prior, even for us that came up in things in the past, why we stayed exclusive in things. We didn't understand it then, but we understand it now. So I'm going to make it crystal clear. For those that send emails with questions like that, I refer you to videos as reference points because most of the questions are answered in those videos, and it's just pointless to rehash the same thing, in my opinion, over and over. So it's not that I'm blowing you off in the emails. It's just easier for you to go watch the video with plenty of material addressing the questions that you're asking in the email. So I want to make this clear. That's why you see me talk about a vast aspect of topics. Again, I'm on vampirism now for the last few weeks. Don't mean I'm exclusive to vampirism, because those that know me, I'll switch it up next week and go into voodoo and hoodoo. I'll switch it up after that and go into demonic integration. That's how you're supposed to be on this path. That's the path to self-mastery. Now, not saying you got to fuck with everything, because there's going to be some things maybe you just ain't vibing or feeling. What I am saying is, if you put yourself in the trap of getting stuck on a specific thing and say you're exclusive to it, that's a problem. Because as I said, the only thing you're mastering is that particular spiritual system. You're not mastering self. And that poses a problem. So I want to make that crystal clear. Now, again, I get emails too about worshiping and how to look at deity/archetypes. I wanted to address that because I think people still are confusing the two. Now, we're going to use the basic definition of what an archetype is. All right. As mentioned many times before, and even in vampirism, in this book, Father Sebastian's book, Michael W. Ford makes it clear, even on this path, since we're talking about vampirism, we'll even use this concept. We don't worship anything outside of ourselves. So anybody that's on this path doesn't look at an archetype as something external to worship. If you do, and you're entitled to that. Now, remember, I want to apply a Luciferian mentality. You're free to do and choose whatever it is you want to do, but you also must accept with those decisions the opposition or those that may not be fully in alliance and agreement with what decisions you take upon as far as your truth and spirituality. Because let's make this clear. You're free to do whatever it is you choose to do. But you also must understand, just because that's the decision and the choice you make, that might not line up with everybody else's ideology. So I say that to say, with deity and archetype, you're constantly working with archetypes when you understand what the definition is. I don't care what path it is you're working. You just got to understand what archetype is and your perspective and how you look at it. The problem is, some of us still have lodged in our subconscious mind that we're looking at it as external deity. So let's just go basic. I'm going to go the basic online definition that you can pull up on whatever, Google, Wikipedia, whatever the fuck it is, because it gives you the basic understanding. All right. So let me see. And I want to be clear on this, because those that are on this path struggling, working, whatever pantheon you're working, okay. So let me pull this up real quick. All right. You got to also be careful, because when you see some of the way they word, there's a couple different definitions. I'm going to go through real fast. Archetype, out of the dictionary, a very typical example of a certain person, right? There's the trick, or thing, right? The book is a perfect archetype of the genre, right? Original that has been imitated. The archetype faith is Abraham. Synonyms: quintessence, essence, representative, model, embodiment. Notice it has a term, embodiment. Prototype, stereotype, more. A recurrent symbol or motif in literature, art, or mythology, right? Then you have another, here's another definition. You can just pull this up on Google. I'm reading right off of Google. An original model after which other similar things are patterned. In the psychology of Carl Jung, archetypes are the images, patterns, and symbols, okay, that rise out of the collective unconscious and appear in dreams, mythology, and fairy tales. This would be one aspect how we work with archetype on this path, from, if you're going to look at it from a Jungian perspective, right? And then I'm going to scroll down here one more time. What is an archetype example, right? In literature, an archetype is a typical character, an action, or a situation. A reason why I'm flipping through a few of them, I'm trying to take you away. It's not just based, because some people look at deity in the physical sense of just a person. For an example, if you're looking at the Egyptian deity Heru or Set, most people are still stuck in this mindset of connecting it just with that aspect. But it goes so much deeper, because, as this definition says here, it also represents an action or a situation that seems to represent universal patterns of human nature. An archetype, also known as a universal symbol, may be a character, a theme, a symbol, or even a setting. So they're different character types, symbols, consciousness. So when we're looking at deity, per se, on this path, to address some of those emails, when we're looking at deity, we're not just looking at the physical. And this is where people are struggling. As I said before, when you're doing your ritualistic work, I don't care what archetype it is you're working with, you're focusing and zoning on what it represents, the symbols that are associated with it, especially when you're doing ritualistic work, the consciousness that archetype represents. There's a form of absorption of vampirism, and I've mentioned this before in the past. It's one of the many aspects of absorption techniques in vampirism, where you can do ritualistic work with an archetype and absorb the consciousness of what the deity represents. This ties into what Sekhmet represented, because it said she devoured the blood of the gods. Sekhmet is a vampiric deity, right? When it says she absorbed or she devoured the blood of the gods, it doesn't mean she literally drank the blood. Okay, what it's talking about is she absorbed the energy, you understand, of what the deities represented. Now, you also read stories in various different texts in ancient Egypt before the warriors, before the Egyptian army or warriors would go into battle, they would invoke Sekhmet because of what she represented. She was a warrior. She devoured the god. She devoured the blood of the gods and defeated all her enemies in her path. So, for an example, if you want to get a clearer understanding, so how does one work with archetypes? So let's use Sekhmet for an example. If I was doing a vampiric ritual working with Sekhmet, right? I would have a symbol, a statue, maybe a sigil that's connected to Sekhmet, just like you can do with any other archetype. And I would I would use the symbol as a focal point or a tool. And as I'm doing my meditation / visualization, I would be focusing in intensely, as intent as I could, on what Sekhmet represented. And what I would also do is, knowing that she's a devourer and she can remove blockages and enemies, I would focus on using that aspect in my spiritualistic work. If there's enemies or obstacles in my path, if I needed things cleared, this is what I would set out in the intent to focus on my ritual. If I wanted to strengthen myself with power, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, I would focus in intently on Sekhmet for all of those things. Those are character types that tie into what archetypes represent: the symbols, the expressions, the prototype. All these things connect to what an archetype is. This is how we approach working with deity and archetypes on this path. Okay, so that's the difference between physically, externally worshiping them and trying to zone in, using it just as the definition described as an archetype. There's many ways to work with it. It could be a symbol, it could be a prototype, it could be something that's in alliance universally with something. It could be the consciousness that the archetype represents, and that's what this path is. Well, that's how it's utilized on this path. Now, also understand this. Now, I'm gonna finish with this and get into what we really need to get into. You're just accessing all of those aspects in the archetype that naturally reside within you. That's how you work with archetype. Now, when you're dealing with demonic integration or creating your own spirits or entities to work with, they are, for example, the Ghulam. Those that are familiar with creating their own personal Ghulams, that goes back to, it's a Hebrew term, you might be familiar, but it goes back even further, taking inanimate objects and shaping them for specific spiritual work. And usually the way you shape that Ghulam would be, if it's something to sharpen your, let's say, your eyesight, your inner sight, you would hide, on the image you created, you would make that very apparent, etc., which I'm not going to get into too much of that now. That's a form of creating your own archetypes, which now gets into personal demonic integration work, which that's a whole nother boat. Now, personal demonic integration work and creating and working with your personal daemon, which is an archetype in the sense because it represents all the personalities and characteristics of you, or what we know as your real self or higher self. So what I'm saying, the element of archetype is in the work there, but it's going to vary on different degrees and aspects depending on the type of work that you're doing. Even I mentioned this before also in chaos magic, same thing, where you focus more on embodying. And remember, you used the word in one of the definitions, to embody the archetype. That's one of the focal points when working with chaos magic. One of the key aspects is when you're working with archetypes is to embody the energy and what the archetype represents. So that's just a quick answer to that whole, and it's going to come up again because it always does, but that's the direction I would point an individual in, and work on doing work to get your mind focused, to getting yourself to understand it and how to put it into perspective. Because I think what happens is people start to see how vast this path is, and they see, yes, you can be all over the place. You do need to have some focus. But I think then out of safety and insecurity, they want to try to cling on to something specific because it makes them feel comfortable. Well, I could tell you this. That's not more than likely what you want to do on this path. because that's gonna lead you astray. If you want to be comfortable and exclusive to something, go back to being a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, Kemetic, whatever it is you were prior to this, because you're gonna struggle on this path. Being a god or a goddess is being versatile, right? Being able to change at will, being able to challenge yourself, not stay comfortable exclusive. Those that know, I mean, those that are in this, the session that I'm doing now on the private classes, know the vastness and the depth of the material it covers. That's shit I don't talk about here, but they know the vastness and the in-depth that it covers. You're going to learn all of those avenues. But not only that, you're going to learn to actually do work. Because remember, this is about doing work. It's not just about reading books. It's not just about talking. It's not just about having discussions. And all those things are important. I'm not saying they're not. But this embodies actually carrying out work and getting results. And that's what the curriculum is designed for. You're going to carry out work. You're going to get results. If you're working in areas financially, if you're working in areas to fix certain aspects of your life, that's the work that I designed to do, especially when I'm working with people and the stuff we do here in private. That's what it's about. If you're not getting results, that's bringing about consistent change, and not all the change is pleasant. I mentioned this before. It's not all pleasant. Working a vampiric path is not pleasant, because it opens up parts of your psyche that you need to be prepared to deal with. We all like to pat ourselves on the back about our, the upside to the things about ourselves, how intelligent we are and what we're good at. And we like to, pat ourselves on the back. But sometimes the growing pains, the /change, and some of the shit you got to deal with can be very challenging. Internal work can be very, very challenging, because when the real self rises to the surface, you open up all things that you start to realize there's things that are affecting me I wasn't really conscious of. Again, it could be stuff that happened to you as a child. It could be ongoing issues you're dealing with now. See, we don't want to focus on that. Everybody just wants to focus on the external materialistic things. And I'm not just talking about, basic stuff. We could be things you buried and you don't think you have, right? But anyway, you get the point. Hopefully that clears up deity / archetype. We're trying to be exclusive to some shit, all right? Again, using the Luciferian mindset and approach, if that's your choice, you're entitled to that. Because as a Luciferian, I also understand, even though I may not agree with somebody's ideology, I understand it, though. I just also understand I don't agree with the shit and I wouldn't do it. Just like I might be saying things that somebody else may not agree with and they wouldn't do it. But as Luciferians in the way that we think, that's fine. There's no problem. But I would never, ever on the path to self-mastery promote being exclusive to one specific thing. That's crazy. Again, you might as well just go back to being, Muslim, Christian, Jew, Kemetic, Buddhist, whatever it is you were, because it's what I'm seeing in that when I see people send me emails like that, what I get out of that, the vibe I get is I need to feel comfortable and safe. Now, you may say again on the surface, no, that's not the case. We're not talking about consciously, but there's something subconsciously that you need to feel safe and warm and secure. There's nothing safe about this path. I'm gonna make that clear. And I say safe, that there's always constant chaos and energy flow going on. And that's a good thing, because as that chaos is consistent, moving and constantly around, you're able to tap into what you need in that chaos to make order in your personal life, because chaos is vast. Remember, go back to the Book of Nun. The first video I did on this a few weeks back, and that's the reason why I went over it, to understand everything that we're talking about right now. The symbology. Now, remember, that Book of Nun, the cosmology of the Book of Nun, was used as an archetype. That was another way of using an archetype. We used what the book represented symbolically and how it applies to ourselves. So there's another way of working with an archetype, which was in the basic definition that was read right off of Google. It can be literature. It can be writings. It could be a place. It's not just a person. I think where people struggle is they focus on the physical person, because even when they see Shango or they see Obatala, they're still focusing just physically on the person. Even though they say they're not, they are. You understand? So yeah, the Book of Nun was used as an archetype in that video a few weeks back. So understand first and foremost, before you get confused with the two, make sure you're clear on what an archetype is and what it represents. All right. So we want to go into, which I didn't get time to go into last week, the bloodlines. You saw I posted them. That's in the title, the Scarab, the Scorpion. And excuse me. We're going to be in chapter 4. If you have the hard copy, it's page 104. So the Serpent, the Scorpion, and the Scarab. I'm not going to go through the entire. I'm just going to touch on some of the key points. Now, here's another example. These represent archetypes of the Asetian bloodline. So we're working. See, sometimes when you just correlate archetype just to deity only, the problem is because deity's in your head and you're thinking of some type of god worship, right? So we're going to use the archetype of what the bloodlines, this is what they represent. This is why they're broken down into these 3 categories, right? It says, since the beginning, the Asetian history has always been triple. Not only because the primordial elders created from the essence of Aset were 3, but also considering they developed in 3 distinct ways, each with their own specific qualities, unbalances, and characteristics, especially in an energetic way. To these different bloodlines inside the Asetian vampiric species, a different nomenclature was used, not only to differentiate between the 3 different sects, but to divine between the mutual, here's the word, people, archetype inside each bloodline. Let me say it again. The mutual archetype inside each bloodline. So I hope now we even get more clarity on what an archetype is. And so we shall refer to them as lineages, right? And this is why I said earlier, you're always working with archetypes constantly, not just in the sense of a physical deity, because again, this is why I don't think people are clear on what an archetype represents. Remember, it could be a body of literature. It could be symbolic. All of these things. It could be the embodiment of what the symbol, the character, or the archetype represents. You understand? So we're looking at, maybe we'll do a video just on that, so we can go into depth, because that's a depth topic, in-depth topic, right? All right, so a lineage is a pure Asetian concept, even though some might find similarities between religious sects, occult, order structures, systems, political hierarchies, or social stratification castes. While this is true, parallels and correlations are not to be drawn, since it is in a personal Asetian only concept, applicable exclusively to Asetians, right? Now I'm going to skip down. There are 3. Next paragraph, if you're following along on page 102. There are 3 and only 3 Asetian lineages. Serpent, the lineage of the Viperines. Scorpion, the lineage of the Guardians. And Scarab, the lineage of the concubines, right? These names have changed many times over the millennia and have been known under different nomenclatures, some modern, others far ancient. Each lineage has its own, very own characteristics, which are most of all related with their particular subtle metabolism, energy, and the way they interact with it. The difference in the specific energy system of each lineage are a consequence of 3 different ways in which the subtle body can react to the Asetian vampiric transformation. But most of all, it is an eternal echo of the inborn predisposition from the first 3 elders, the primordials, to be created and manifested in this world, each one the founder of each lineage, but all 3 created by Aset in the first place and forever bound to her. The newborn soul being divine and ultimately different from the human soul before the dark kiss makes the Asetian system to manifest differently on the way he perceives, manipulates, and interacts with energy. but also affects his personality, personal strengths and weaknesses, abilities and powers, and sometimes even some basic physical characteristics, in a way redefining everything he or she, we should say, forever, right? Lineages, these three paths of the Asetian vampirism are a hallmark of their whole structure, not only functioning as a working magical framework, but also manifesting through a whole archetypal system and full-featured energy circle optimized by each lineage's own specifications. Energetically, they complement each other, having the abilities of one covering the weakness of the other. So notice one thing I want to point out here. It's also addressing, when working this path in this spiritual system, it's all, notice how it's mentioned several times, addressing your weaknesses and your issues. And as I said many times in the past, that's one thing that's unique about this path. It doesn't promise and promote to you pie in the sky. It doesn't fluff and stroke your ego and just focus on and pumping and filling your head with how divine and great you are, blah, 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 blah. Though all those things are true, but sometimes that can be a false sense. It could be an illusion and a false sense of security. Sometimes we start to take on that mentality like I'm the shit, and because I'm this and that, and I did a little research and study, got a little knowledge, and I connected with this, now all of a sudden I'm the shit. No, well, this path is going to make you realize that sometimes you are full of shit, as opposed to thinking you are the shit. Because what tends to happen is it brings stuff to the surface. You say to yourself, damn, I need to do some work on this. I need to fix this. I need to address this. I need to be better in this area. I need to go to work on this particular aspect of my life. I'm struggling with this. If you're real with yourself, you know what I'm talking about. If you're shaking your head and saying, oh, no, not me, then you're pretty much one of the jackasses that's under an illusion and don't really understand what's really going on. You think you do, because usually you take on that egotistical, cocky mentality because it's covering up other insecurities that you're not dealing with. Now, I'm not saying there's not a time for cockiness and there's not a time for feeding off the energy of your ego, because as we said before, ego can be productive. Ego is something that protects you in times where you need to put up a defense mechanism. But ego can be damaging when you start to, as we say, what's the term they use? Start feeling yourself and creating this false sense of illusion that, it's just about you. It's just about you, but it's not. Let me say that again. It's just about you, but it's not. Because it's also about you, first and foremost, no doubt, but how you interact with everything that is around you in your environment, people, nature, the multiverses that you create in your subjective. All of this is important to put into correlation. So when I say it's about you, yes and no, that's what I mean when I say that. But sometimes we forget all of those elements that play the part, and we just think it's just my way or the highway. That's where you start to get fucked up. All right. So I forgot where the fuck I left off. All right, here we go. Okay, right here. First paragraph. Resulting in a highly powerful closed circuit. In this AAA, energy is balanced at its peak without stagnation and dissipation, promoting dynamism and balance of three. Like this, they can elevate the frequencies of their own vampiric energy, making it denser with a higher quality and vibration. So it's telling you how you can fix shit that's not right. However, even though of a high importance, energy-wise, the metaphysical relation between the three lineages has suffered over the years. Since the long-guard harmonious relation between the primordial elders and Septepti, members of each lineage have gone through a myriad of situations over the eras, from passionate lovers to fiercest enemies. They have incarnated and met under all sorts of conditions in many different cultures, but their internal links resist still. They are unbreakable, and even nowadays they eventually defend each other and fight for the other Asetians if a situation arises, because the subtle Asetian lingers forever. Now, always know there will be that tribal aspect or nature, which is always going to reside in us in our bloodline. And this is sometimes where differences come into play. Even though spiritually you might have individuals that are on a similar path, but by blood and nature, they might carry a different energy that might be in opposition to each other. This is a reality with everything in life. You must understand that too, because that is important when dealing with others around you. Because, for an example, these three bloodlines, as I mentioned here, we'll use this example. They may not have gotten along, but knew when there was a common cause to get something done, they figured out a way to put that aside and get it done. Also knowing that they would never be the best. Look, you're not going to be the best of friends with everybody you know. It's just life. It's just the way things are. It's the nature of things. So you're fooling yourself if you think you're going to like everybody and everybody's going to like you. That's a bunch of bullshit. Bottom line is, if one, I mentioned this before, if you like everybody, there's something wrong with you. And if you think everybody likes you, there's even something even more fucked up wrong with you. The reason why I say that is because you're living in a world of an illusion. If you don't have some type of enemies or some type of people talking about you, then it means you're not doing something right. Now, I'm saying that to also say on the flip side, if that's all people doing is talking about you, then you're also doing something wrong. And I'm talking about in quote unquote a negative context. So I'm trying to show you the term it used up there earlier by taking those energies. Remember, it said keeping them dissipating and not stagnating. Now, use the word balance, as you know, we like to use the word harmony. And notice how it said not keeping them stagnated, because when you keep that energy stagnated or still, then it becomes a problem where it starts to consume you, put you in the wrong frame of mind. You start to become reactionary as opposed to proaction. You start to take shit personal. You can go in the shells, and you can start to be controlled by your emotions, right? This is all important to understand, because that can play a part in your spiritual development, right? Big aspect that can't be overlooked. All right. All right. The last paragraph in this section, then I'm going to briefly go through some of the lineages. I'm not going to go through the whole thing if you're following the book. It's just not enough time. The following definitions and concepts about the three Asetian and lineages are just a framework in attempt to categorize the bloodlines. It is by no means final, static, or decisive. The vampires from a specific lineage are not expected to have all conditions described below, and they sure have different characteristics that are not mentioned in these texts. There are more specifications currently known to each of the bloodlines, which were kept out of this work. This was done consciously and with a specific purpose in mind, but it is important to understand that these characteristics are based on an analysis of some Asetian individuals from each lineage, and according to the hallmarks manifested by each of the primordials. This does not mean that there cannot be an Asetian from one of the lineage who does not possess those characteristics, or simply does not fit in the model, because, as stated, it is just a very simple approach to the Asetian framework, which is not supposed to be firmly defined by words. All right. So the first lineage, and again, I'm just going to go through some key points on them. I'm not going to go through it, then it's too long. The lineage of the Viperines. So let's get the basic understandings, right? Deals with the serpent, deals with the Kundalini energy, right? You can find the symbol of the serpent. It deals with that Apepian energy, which we're going to get into. Now, in Michael W. Ford's book, Second Apep, he focuses heavy. A lot of the information that, or the bloodline, be it known or not to some, he's really dealing with this aspect of vampirism. You'll see it encoded when you're working with that aspect of Apep and chaos and darkness, and Set being the control of it. All of this ties into that, because remember, Set also is vampiric in nature when working with that archetype in addition to Sekhmet, which obviously makes perfect sense if you study this path. All right. So the lineage of the Viperines is known as the serpent, representing the most predatory of all immortal bloodlines, a symbol of advanced metaphysical senses, capable of delivering unsuspected lethal attacks, being the perfect archetype. There's that word again, right? Perfect archetype of eternal rebirth and transformation. So what does a Viperine represent? The archetype of rebirth and transformation. So there's another aspect of understanding and working with archetype. Now, this bloodline of vampires, if you practice this path, they're very aggressive. As I said, they're very predatory in nature. They do a lot of feeding and they do a lot of attacking, right? this is not a path of vampirism for everybody. I'm gonna make that shit crystal clear. If this is not the nature of the work you would like to do, I probably wouldn't mess with this. If you don't know what you're doing, you can drain yourself and actually you can do more detrimental damage to yourself than what you're setting out to do. I would just suggest people, if this is a path that they choose, to choose wisely, and make sure you're not pure emotional in your work and you do with this path, because I've seen the reverse happen on individuals that got too overly aggressive with this path. Now, to say that, let me follow it up with, on the flip side, if used correctly and in the right amounts and used in a very responsible way, it can be a very rewarding path. One good aspect of this path is non-contact absorption and feeding can be very powerful in nature. It can be done anywhere, at any time or at will. Where I've seen people use this path or this lineage to do psychic attacks on somebody or do attacks on somebody, I've watched them get fucked up because they didn't really understand who and what they were trying to attack. Now, one thing you also must understand with this, and every principle, whether it's Father Sebastian, anybody that teaches vampirism will tell you, you never want to work an attack on somebody in the same current. That will fuck you up big time. You understand? Because first and foremost, the individual will be aware of the attack. And if your judgment gets clouded and you're so focused on whatever personal thing you might be attacking for out of pure revenge, the shit will come back on you. And I've seen it come back on an individual 10 times folds. When you're linked in on this path, let me make this clear. And paths similar like this, your awareness increases. Like I've said before, not to sound spooky, you tend to you're able to zone in on certain things that you couldn't do before. You kind of know when an attack is coming, if somebody's is attempting it, and then you have the ability to send that shit back. This is real. It's a part of this path. Destructive magic is a part of this path. It's something I don't really like to talk about openly. I remember one time, which I would never answer in an open forum like this, somebody a few weeks back, and I totally ignored the question. I wouldn't suggest you ask me questions like that in open. Did you ever do a death curse on somebody? Who the fuck would ask that in an open forum? Like I'm going to go into detail on YouTube about that. In my opinion, it's just some things you keep private. There's some things you keep in the chamber, your ritualistic chamber. I don't believe in commercializing stuff like that because I think it takes away from the power of the work, number one. And two, real bad boys and real bad girls move in silence. They don't need to publicize work like that. So as I mentioned in previous videos, if you got to go and get on camera and talk about that shit, usually you're full of shit. Usually it's just a psychological ploy. It's actually the reverse. You can't do any of that shit. You don't have any of that power that you're talking about. Just the need that you feel to talk about it all the time shows to me that that's a weakness. And that's why I don't really get into some of that publicly. Not because it's too deep and nobody's ready for it or I know it more than somebody. No, that's not the case. I just think some things need to stay sacred and private in the chamber. You just don't talk about that shit. And that's why I remember somebody had asked, and also in one of the videos a couple weeks back, about like when we do the rituals, maybe do a live stream of it. I would never do that. The reason why I would never do that, again, I think it takes away from the sanctity of the ritual. And again, this is just my opinion on it. And if you go back in that video, and I can't remember, that's in here a lot. And I respectfully explain why I would never do that. I would never want to film a private ritual like that because I just think it takes away from the sanctity. 1, 2, you don't really know who's watching. 3, you got to be careful what you're doing in a ritual. Because if you have, for an example, individuals that know how to perform psychic attacks, they might be able to overanalyze, critique your work, and catch something you might be doing in the video. So that's why when somebody had asked that question a few weeks back about, and I understand their intent. They were saying so I know some people can't travel and get there, and I get that, but I just think it just takes away from the sanctity of the ritual. If you go back in the video, and that's why I explained in the video I wouldn't do that for that reason. It just takes away to me, some things need to just stay in the chamber room and stay there, and that's it. It needs to stay sacred, not sacred in a religious sense, not sacred in a holy or thou sense, because you just don't know, again, when you're live streaming shit, making it public, you just don't know, who's watching. So I just wouldn't do that. I'm not in agreement with that. That's me. Now, if you're somebody that has a difference of opinion on it, that's fine. But I would never do that. That's just my take on that. Being on this path and working this, and plus also coming through different esoterical and spiritual orders, such as let's say OTO, the Rosicrucian order, some other orders I would not care to talk about openly, would be totally against that for that reason. They would never ever even think of doing something like that, because again, it takes away from the sanctity and the sacredness of the ritual. Again, not from a holy perspective, from an energy perspective. So keep that in mind. And back to this, though. Some of the character types of Viperines. I'm going to skip down. As I said, I'm not going to go through all this. The lineage are usually highly evolved beings and prophets with unique abilities to command and lead, who see far beyond the horizon. These characteristics of the Viperine, being more than an ability but a taste, are easily recognized among their kind. While this is a powerful attribute that can be harnessed for the good of the Asetian species, knowing that most of the tradition's evolution would never be possible without Viperine's great insight and intuition. It is also a dangerous characteristic, and I was just mentioning. It can become unstable and achieve huge proportions, easily transforming to the typically developed intolerance from this lineage and sometimes heightened arrogance. This also manifests in a firm personality, many times egocentric, from whom most of all likes the sensation of victory and achievement, feeding from these occurrences many times. Then I want to skip to page 109 and finish with this aspect. Above all, the serpent lineage has a great energy need resulting from the highest energetic metabolism, which implies a strong need to feed directly from vital energy. Viperines need to feed regularly in order to be kept sane and stable. And that's why I said it's a very aggressive path. And there has to be discipline, all right? When I say discipline, this is where I say where individuals can get out of control with the absorption and the feeding aspects spiritually. And as I said before, it can consume them and drain them. So you got to be disciplined if this is an aspect that you deal with, all right? And it's going to explain some of the stuff I just said. This can be done in different ways and under different levels, from simple direct drains done socially to more intimate sexual drains done privately. Because of this high energy need, they do not take any relevant advantage with ambient feeding, since the energy is not only scarcer, but also a lot poorer, except in some special circumstances of empowered environments. They have a very different system towards direct contact feeding and sexual feeding, specifically adapted to higher levels of need, but they can also effectively feed from the environment when in sacred ground, their native lands in Egypt. Now, sexual feeding, that's a whole nother topic in itself. And we will get into that. We'll actually get in for those that are taking the session, there's a whole section we're going to do on that. And I think some of that stuff needs to you could talk about certain aspects of that openly, but I think that you also have to be careful about when you talk about, because that can be misconstrued. All right. The second one, Scorpion, the lineage of the Guardians, right? Let's talk about that real quick. All right. The lineage of the Guardians is known as the Scorpion, representing their antisocial behavior, advanced defensive mechanism, highly protective nature, and strong personality. The Scorpions found in the wild, very common in Egypt, are known for being aggressive when touched, just like Guardians. In ancient times, it was believed that they would sting themselves with their own venom when trapped in a deadly situation, reminding the choice made by some of the ancient vampiric donors and wives to kill themselves if their honor was tainted or if their masters were dead, right? Go down to the second paragraph if you're following along in the book. Guardians are remarkably important pillars inside the Asetian family. They are commonly defined by their powerful connection with the earth and the slowest energy metabolism among vampires, which allows them to fast for long periods of time without feeding or actively manipulating energy, turning out to be a great vampiric asset. So this is a type of vampiric path or bloodline that they don't do a lot of the absorption and feeding techniques. They can do limited amounts, of absorption and energy work, and it can sustain them for a long time. They're more intellectual by nature. It's more of a mental thing. So again, I'm going through this to also show you, when people hear vampirism, sometimes they think there's just, a specific aspect of it only. And this, again, is versatile. So this is talking about that type of approach to the vampiric method. And some of you, and I know some people that are like this, they practice vampirism, but more on this level. It's more laid back. It's a little more subdued. It's more, mental in nature. Still very highly spiritual, but it might be a little bit more laid back, as it's saying here, right? Again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through a lot of this. I'm going to skip to, where is it? Go to page 120 and showing how both of them kind of go together, Viperines and Guardians. Guardians together with Viperines are the most elitist among the Asetian lineages. This, in many cases, can lead to antisocial behaviors and actual interest in being kept apart from the common vulgar society. They most of all keep their friendships and relationships to a minimum. You're going to find on this path, your circles are small, only sharing their true self with a highly elite few, having no interest whatsoever in socializing with the masses or getting integrated. This is highly visible after the awakening. On the other hand, it is common to find more sociable Asetians among concubines that possess a far less elitist personality, integrating and dealing a lot better with human. All right. And again, when you get time, I'd read the whole section. There's just not enough time to go through it. And then the last one I want to go through before we go into the chat and have a discussion, take some questions and all that good shit. The concubines, right? The Scarab. The lineage of the concubines is known as the Scarab, a symbol of their highly transformative and adopting nature. Along with their characteristically intense cycling and ability to share energy with a great ease. Being the most common among Asetians, Scarabs are also most chaotic of the three lineages. They're the most chaotic of the three lineages, right? This is because the use of a hallmark in the concubine energy system was inborn and uncontrollable energy cycling. Concubines are constantly absorbing energy around them and from others, filtering and changing it to then send it back to the environment. While this is a great quality, since among many things allows them to be an almost unlimited vampiric energy supply, especially for Viperines with whom they easily connect to a greater depth, also condemns them to great mental and energetic instability. All right. Then I'm going to skip down to the second paragraph. And this is what you got to be careful of. I don't really fuck with this aspect of it, to be honest with you, but some things that you do need to know. This aspect or lineage must most of all have the ability to become submissive, controlled, dominated, and drained by the ones they connect. This does not mean that they act like that with others. On the contrary, since they can also become easily explosive and uncontrollable by people outside of their most intimate relations, making them not submissive at all. For some people, because of the energy cycling and consequential easily adaptation to different environments, this can sometimes result in a lack of personality from the concubines that can be seen as just a consequence of their own energetic nature. All right. You're going to find, in short, again, so not to go through the whole thing because, again, it's just not enough time. It's an influx of emotions on this path. That influx of energy, constant mood changes. Being able to adapt. Even though, like I said, there I mentioned the submissive and they can be submissive or controlled. Don't take that as a weakness, because as it said there, they can be just as explosive. Just like when anybody's pushed to a limit, they can be very explosive. So again, I would suggest when you get more time, if you have the book and have not read the section on the 3 bloodlines, I will make sure you do take some time to go through that, get yourself familiar with it, and also what it will help you with if you're an individual that's interested in being on that path. I would suggest if you're brand spanking new, you want to identify, well, what aspect of it do I want to actually practice? When you're going into any new type of work, you should be clear, one, on what your intent is, obviously, and how in depth do you want to or not want to go. Because if you don't formulate some type of strategy on your approach, then that's usually another issue why you may not get the results or the spiritual growth. When I say results, I'm also talking about growth. So it's very important. The book will give you a good understanding on different aspects of vampirism practices. So, for an example, because this is a very highly spiritual path, I would read the book and figure out, when I'm done, I'd formulate a plan and figure out, well, what aspects do I want to utilize? What aspects do I want to practice? What is it I don't want to bother? Now, the bloodlines make it clear on the different approaches, personalities, mentalities, and aspects of the people that are on these paths to represent. So usually, if you look at one of these bloodlines and gravitate towards it, that's also going to identify aspects of your personality, your nature. It's also going to help you understand yourself. Me personally, probably the first 2, I probably would say I utilize techniques from those first 2. Not that I don't ever really use anything from the 3rd lineage as it described from that type of approach. But I would say if I had to describe the methodology on my approach, I would that's the way I would describe it. So you need to be clear on that approach, right? Now, remember, these are the 3 blood. Now, I want to make this clear, because remember, we went over a couple weeks back, Aset as a dark god, right? Right? Because she is by nature. This aspect of her is never talked about. Remember, this is the bloodline of her children. You understand? This is the bloodline by nature and spiritually to who and what she connects with. Something that's not really talked about, that goes back to ancient Egypt, something that's not really addressed, because we get this one-sided, fluffy aspect of Aset all the time as being this divine mother goddess. All right. I think that gives you a quick, sum up, of that. Again, the sections, I mean, they're not super long, but they're long. I'm not going to go through all of them, because that would just be, 1, boring, and 2, it'd be way too time consuming. So anyway, let's get to some questions and some dialogue, and let's have discussion so I can wake up, because I've been up since 4 a.m. So I need to, let's get into some dialogue to get me awake, number 1. So I'm going to scroll up to the top. Now, I hope also you've been going over some of the videos previously, because like I said, we've been going over this topic and different aspects of it the last several weeks, so you can see how dynamic it is. And as I said, in my opinion, this work is so much more than just vampirism, because there's so many aspects of spirituality in here. Energy work is probably, maybe, I'm not sure, I'm debating whether to continue with that next week or go on to something else. But the energy work is another good aspect in this book, the meditation, the visualization, which leads into more deeper, intense work. But anyway, let's see what we got in the chat room. All right. So again, peace to, I know I greeted some of you already, Ninth Disciple, Ikua Aren, Mama Muerte, Mave, Sister Trina, Regina Green, peace. Stepwab, brother Stepwab. What's going on, brother? Duamu Ken Rez, Duma Ken Rez, Sister Yvette. All right. So let's see what we got. I see Mama Muerte tapped in. Yeah, the sage and the crystals don't work if you keep negativity around you. Well, nothing will work if you constantly you defeat your own work when you're negating, right? Now, I know we hear that word negative, and sometimes the mind goes to the opposite of it, positive. But we got to get out of that. When we say positive and negative, remember the word negative has root in the word to negate. What does it mean to negate something? Right? It means to, shoot it down. So I look at the word negativity in relation to spiritual work. When you negate your own spiritual work, you destroy it. So the more simpler explanation would be somebody say you're being negative. And it's true. If you are a person that's constantly, quote unquote, negative, you could have all the sage, all the crystals, all the spiritual powders, all the herbs. None of that shit will work for you, period, in any of your ritualistic work. Because first and foremost, remember, one of the key elements we talk about all the time, you must be in a sound mind and body. Sound mind means, all right, you hear the terms insane, and really that's can be misconstrued, because what really defines somebody as being insane or sane, that's actually a matter of personal opinion and perception. But I think we can understand the basis of somebody being grounded in reality, meaning having a good grasp of the spiritual, quote unquote, the physical or the objective and the subjective. Where somebody may not be in harmony, or somebody might say insane, is where they might be too subjective to the point where they lose sight of everyday reality. They're not, all right, it's great. You want to, astral travel and go into all these higher spiritual states. But when it starts affecting your everyday life, and as I mentioned before, some people use that as an escapism for not dealing with everyday life, then it becomes a problem. All right. So no doubt you can use all the ritualistic tools, all the incenses, resins, crystals, sage, herbs. None of that shit's going to work if you ain't got this right. This is step one. Before you carry out any work, you must make sure your mind is sound. And when I mean sound, I'm not just talking about what somebody would label crazy. I'm talking about make sure you got a grasp of what you're getting ready to do. Make sure you have a thorough understanding. Make sure you've prepared yourself. That's being in a sound mind. When you're just doing shit unaware. Now, I'm not talking about where somebody just, jumps in, because it's good to have a little chaos. But I'm talking about when somebody confident just jumps in to some chaos is different from somebody that's not prepared to deal with chaos. Two different things. You got to make sure you're not the individual that's jumping into chaos but ain't ready to deal with chaos, because that could pose a huge problem. All right. And this is a good comment by Sister Yvette. She says, on this path, one should never be comfortable. I believe that once that happens, it's time to try another path. 100%. I agree. And like I said earlier, if you came in later, sometimes people will come on this path. It's the same thing. They gravitate towards something they like. And as I said earlier, it's human nature to like some things more than others, no doubt. because there's systems that I like better than others, and I might work with a little bit more than others. But I know when it's time to change it up. When I see myself too stuck in that for an extended period of time, there's a part of my spiritual nature that will kick in and say, all right, it's time to change it up. It keeps you fresh. It keeps you challenged. It keeps you, again, on your toes. It keeps you sharp. So you should never be comfortable. So I was mentioning earlier some of the emails I got the last 2 days about that, where I still see people wanting to be exclusive to something. So even though they might have left Christianity or Islam or being in some type of Kemetic circle or group, I get it. Sometimes you can come over to this path. It can be quite overwhelming because there's so much. Again, I refer people back to a video I did a couple months ago, I believe about a month and a half, 2 months ago, maybe, I can't remember. The vastness and versatility of this path. And that will make it clear. It's again, if you want to be exclusive to something, especially on this path, if you want to just be, again, vampiric, let's just say, since we're doing vampirism tonight, then the only thing, again, as I said earlier, you're mastering is that specific path. You see, what people will use it's just like somebody that, let's just say somebody that used to be conscious, right? And let's just say they go back to being in the church or vice versa. They left the church, come on this path, and they still have a church mindset where they need to have that structure. They come in on this and they're so left-hand path, and they're so occult, and they're so, hardcore. And as I mentioned before, the hardcore, I've watched so many people over the years profess to be so hardcore, and you don't see them no more, right? They're the ones you got to watch out for the most. Well, then they just find something that they're comfortable with, and they don't realize they're still taking the church mentality. They might say they're not on the surface, but they are. And subconsciously, something there's an insecurity there that need still arises, that they need to be comfortable. So I tried again when I did those videos a few weeks back or a month or so ago on Luciferianism. That was to get you to understand the mindset of how one should approach this path. So my approach on this path is very Luciferianism in nature. That's the way I believe, and I say I believe because as being a God over my reality, that's the approach that works for me. I really would advocate that an individual, one, would stay open, never get comfortable, and be very versatile, because that's what a true Luciferian does. A Luciferian would never say, I'm just, let's just say, I just do Babylonian magic because I like it, or I'm exclusively deal with the voodoo pantheon only, because we're back to religion again. Okay, so when somebody asks me, I am all those things, and all those things are me. And it's the same thing with you people watching the videos. You are all of those things. A true master, a god or a goddess, is able to access those things when need be and work with them. Okay, to me, that's the proper approach. That's what's worked for me. May not work for everybody else, but that's what's worked for me. All right, what else we got? But that's an excellent comment by Sister Yvette. It's true. Sister Sonia follows it up with, I can attest to that for real. Mama Muerte types, if you're not ready for the truth, the path is not for you. And we have to also understand that, and I've talked about this a lot over the last couple of weeks, truth is personal. You can't accept somebody else's truth. Now, on the surface, all these fluffy paths pretend like there's one universal truth. That's a bunch of bullshit. Okay, because that's how religions were started. Okay, because the same people that compiled the Bible and the Quran claimed that what they were teaching was, quote unquote, the universal truth or the truth. We have to be careful of that. So we can never fall for somebody's concept or ideology on the truth. So if somebody says, let's say for an example, in relation to what we're talking about now, oh, this is the way you should do it, and this is it, and this is it only. If you're in agreement with that, then you fall into that category. You understand? So truth is personal. We have to understand that what might be a truth to one individual may not be a truth to another. So the question I've always posed over the last couple of years, and I popped it up frequently here and there, what is truth? And the answer is simply truth is personal. Truth becomes a reality when the individual raises themselves up to the reality of that truth, because then it becomes real to you, the individual. Truth is not because you sat in some class or at a lecture or you belong to some organization and they pump these concepts in your head and said, this is the divine truth. I mean, how many of these organizations exist today that claim to have the truth? I'm telling you that to test because back in the day, I used to belong to a bunch of them. You understand? All of these Mickey Mouse clubs usually have some leader over it who claims to be linked into the divine, and they got the truth of the universe, and this is the only way. And if you don't, look at it this way, then it's wrong. That's ridiculous to me. You understand? Because truth is personal, because any master can take one individual's truth and find something adverse to it. Just like I might be saying some things tonight, somebody can find something adverse to it, adverse to them. And that is okay. See, when we take this approach as, oh, what I know and what I'm saying, that is the truth, you set yourself up now, or you open yourself up for an attack. You open yourself up to be scrutinized. And the problem is a lot of these people in these conscious circles, they get offended and they want to get aggressive in debate when you attack their ideology. Personally, me, I couldn't give a fuck. I couldn't care what you are and what you're not. Just stay in your motherfucking lane. And as long as you don't enforce that nonsense on me, I'm okay with it. But if you choose to get stupid and try to force your bullshit on me, then a can of whoop ass comes out. Then your feelings get hurt. Then we got to attack your doctrine and your ideology and rip it apart from the very core fabric. And believe me, I've done it many times in the past, only when need be. And I say this with all sincerity, but I would never go out of my way to intentionally try to badger or attack somebody. I would only do that if I'm attacked. I mean, I've literally gotten into debates over the years where literally left people in tears, crying, literally, not even an exaggeration. When that side of my nature comes out, it's not a pretty thing, because you awaken that warrior, you awaken that aggressive energy. And I've done it to comedic people, religious people, when they got overly aggressive with their ideology and then started to get personal. It's something I try to avoid. It's an area that I had to work on spiritually, because I started to see as I got older that confrontation and debate in itself is a form of draining vampirism, because it can suck you dry. So I would only resort to those tactics when you get overly aggressive. So I've only had to probably do it a handful of times over the last several years. I've had people come into classes, get stupid, and had their ass fed to them on a platter. And I don't say this out of arrogance. I say it out of confidence. There's a difference. Understand the difference between arrogance and confident. I'm confident in the shit I know. I'm confident. I don't care if you want to debate on history. I think it's pointless. But if I got to go history on you, I'll go history on you. To me, this shit is pointless, because that ain't going to do nothing for us in 2018. If you want to get, with historical data, like I say, Christians, I've debated with them, know that Bible way better than they do from front to back. Same thing with Muslims in the Quran, and don't even need to be anymore practicing any of those circles. So when need be, if it has to arise, you might have to resort to those tactics sometimes, because being on this path and people so spooked out about it, the first thing they like to do is say, oh, this person's crazy. Oh, he's a devil worshiper. Oh, he's into all this crazy occult shit, blah, 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 blah. Let me come with my spiritual arrogance and think I'm going to fucking persuade my way. Yeah, you don't want to do that. Trust me when I tell you. That'd be one of the worst things that you could do. Occasionally, you'll find, and I've found this, over the years, usually that's a defense mechanism people will put up. And I've even had people come back after the fact when they really thought about it, say, you know what? Because I was so, reactive and emotional, and didn't really, sit down and think about what was being said, they realized some of the shit actually made sense. And that's what our job is, just to open people up, to bring a certain awareness. And if you can do that, then anything, your job is done. It's not about trying to convert somebody over to the shit or the shit you like. It's not what we do. But if you can just open them up to a new awareness that they weren't even aware of, you did your job. It's that simple. All right. All right, this is a good comment by Sonia. Why would people want to focus on their weaknesses? People want greatness. Rare they face their issues. Good question. Now, I was talking about earlier, there was a point in one of the excerpts I was reading about your weaknesses. That should be one of the first things that you should always be focusing on, and especially when you first come on the path. But you should always continue that work throughout your process and your journey, because your weaknesses will always be there, but can you turn those weaknesses around and make them a strength? How does somebody do that? All right. Let me give you an example. Some people come on this path from jump for all the wrong reasons. They want to just get finances right away. They think they're going to become so powerful and dark. And I'm not saying that that's not part of this path, because that comes in time. It doesn't come until you address your bullshit, your weaknesses, your issues. What are we talking about? You might come on this path and realize loss of a significant other, a sibling, family member, had a traumatic effect on you. And it doesn't mean, I'm not talking about something that just happened recently. That's obvious. But I'm saying this from my own personal experience. My mother, who most of you know, my father passed away January of this year, but my mother, who passed away March 26th of 1996, I still realize through some of my work that it has a continued impact on me, right? Stuff like that. You might be carrying a lot of baggage. You might be the product of abusive relationships, constant abusive, disastrous relationships, and it's filtered into your personal and your spiritual life. You might have issues with your children and not realizing the impact and the trauma it has on you. You might have a horrible relationship or a very unsuccessful, abusive relationship with your parents. That's been something ongoing for years, and that could be issues you're dealing with. You might be struggling, let's say, with yourself. What do we mean? You may not be where you want to be in life at the current moment, so you get hard on yourself. That's a weakness. It's a weakness in the sense, it doesn't mean don't be hard on yourself to motivate yourself, but it could be a weakness in the sense where you start wallowing in your pity. And that same energy you utilize wallowing in your pity, you can utilize that energy to motivate yourself to move forward and bring about a change. See, this is the internal work that's strongly connected and part of this path that nobody talks about, because everybody thinks it's just about, being at the altar and the robe and working with crystals and herbs and pentagrams and daggers. And again, that's part of it. But that's not really where the core work is practiced. I can tell you that shit right now from experience. And those that have experience know what the fuck I'm talking about. You're going to find you're going to have to go into, and again, go back to that Cosmogony of Nun book. You're going to have to go into that inner depth, or that deep, dark abyss of your subconscious mind, to really get to know yourself, to really get to know who and what you really are, to really get to understand your strengths and your weaknesses. And that goes with a lot of personal meditation. I've always said this, and I want to make this crystal clear. The groundwork for activating a lot of this energy is getting in connection with your bloodline, understanding your bloodline ancestors, those that you are aware of and not, and also understanding your spiritual ancestors, or spirit guides, as some would like to call them, because I say that's the groundwork, because they're going to give you the awareness and the intuition when you activate that consciousness to make proper decisions, to move in the right direction, to be motivated in certain areas that you're lacking, to make you aware of what areas you should be moving towards to improve yourself. Communicating, quote unquote, with the spirit and the ancestors And you'll find this at the core of all these systems, even on the left-hand path or path of self-mastery. And anybody that knows me and has worked with me over the years, it's one of the first things I tell people, and we discuss a lot, that'll come up in personal consultations. They'll say, yeah, I got this altar set up, I'm doing this. And that's great. They're doing all these different spiritual systems. They got these beautiful altars set up. And I look and I say, where's your ancestral altar? And it gets quiet. I haven't set one up yet. So you did all that, but it's like building a house, but not having the structure, the foundation. You must, I don't care what type of ritualistic work you're doing, you must have something set up for your ancestors. And you could do that any way you choose. When I say ancestors, I also want you to get out of your mind. It doesn't just mean the standardized, traditional African aspect of it, because that's the first thing that comes to mind. Even though that's the aspect I use, you can set up whatever you see fit, the methodology that connects you to your bloodline, to your ancestors. Usually the core elements are there, the food offerings, the altar, pictures of relatives, etc. But implements and how you set that up, you can choose to do that however you see fit that you think connects you to your ancestors. I don't care how you do it, but there should be some energy work connected on that level, because to me, that's the foundation. If you choose not to, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with it, but I can tell you from not just myself, many other people would be in agreement with that. So it's just a suggestion. That core work needs to be there, because that's part of doing a lot of this internal and personal work, because your communication, because remember, we're not worshiping our ancestors, because I hate that word. Worship ties you into religion. You are honoring and revering, or showing reverence and respect, and or the propitating your ancestors, as we say, and sometimes in certain circles. And you will find when you do something consistently, regularly with that, on at least on a weekly basis, you will see tremendous growth and change. But that's excellent, excellent, excellent question. Gilberto, I know you typed this in earlier. Maybe you could refresh my memory, where you made a comment that you were talking with a coworker about that this afternoon. Maybe refresh my memory. I must have been saying something at the time you typed that in. Right. Yeah, no fuckery or fluffinators. That's not allowed. The fluffinators get consumed. Yeah, another good point by Sister Sonia. People like being popular and having their ego stroked. And this is why people get into a lot of these systems. Keep it real. Not just this. I mean, look at all the other systems. It's become that, unfortunately. Remember this, we just read a section in there. When somebody's linked into this aspect or system of spirituality, they tend to want to take the opposite road. They don't want, the attention. They keep their circles small. They don't want to be around a lot of that nonsense no more. And what that usually shows is growth. It usually shows maturity. It takes to a whole nother level. Now, that's where kind of suppressing the ego comes in. The younger, less mature person would, in my estimation, falls under that individual that like having their ego stroked. And one thing I found over the years, right, and that's the problem I have to this day with a lot of these Kemetic circles, right, these conscious circles. It's, people like to go to these events for, just as Sister Sonia put in there, having their ego stroke. They like to be told how great they were and this great lineage that they come from, all being true, don't get me wrong. They like to hear all these wonderful things that makes them feel good and superior, and that's all it's really doing, is stroking their ego. Then they leave these events and functions and they go back to doing the same old shit, and they usually take the victim mentality, blaming
reason why I'm a failure is because, the white man did this. And, they take on that black and white concept. I want to make that clear. We know on this path, racism, I'm not saying racism doesn't exist, because it does, but it doesn't define you. Only unless you allow it to. Right? So that's a cop-out, especially in this day and time. That's a cop-out, because you can't say you're a god or a goddess and then on the flip note, turn around and say you have no methodology to overcome that. Then that's crazy to me. That means that whatever spiritual shit you're studying, you might want to reevaluate that shit. Because if you're a god or a goddess, there's no such thing as I can't. You understand? So you got to be careful how you use those terms. Yeah, and this is another good comment by Sonia, something I was talking about earlier. Filming a ritual can destroy the energy / work. You don't know who's watching and with what intent. All right. And earlier I was talking about a few weeks back, somebody had asked in the chat room, which I know their intent was good. Don't get me wrong. Or one that their intent was good. And I know it was their desire to participate. Had asked, well, what about live streaming one of the rituals we did at one of the events? And I had made it clear I wouldn't do that because of kind of something similar to what Sonia typed in. I just think it takes away from the energy and the sanctity of the ritual. That's just my opinion. I mean, you may say no, and that's fine, but I wouldn't do it because I believe, this is me personally, in my experience, I just think some things should stay in the chamber room and be there only. I just don't think it should be commercialized like that. That's where it takes away from the energy. And as Sonia said, you don't know who's watching. That's another thing. Now, I'm not saying you can't, like we've done it here in videos here, you can't demonstrate a technique. But a full-blown ritual where somebody is in first of all, you know what that's like to me? You ever see pictures of these motherfuckers? They take pictures of themselves in these spiritual positions. Think about this for a minute. We've all seen it on Facebook, right? They're in these lotus positions where they're doing shit like this. They're doing all the. Who the fuck's taking them pictures? And how can you fictitiously capture a highly spiritual moment? Because you're really playing for the camera. Think about that. We all know these spooky ass people that take these pictures on all these social media platforms. We've seen them. You probably got friends on your Facebook. They in the meditation position, or they sitting on some rocks at the beach with the water splashing. They got their eyes closed and they're trying to be in this deep, intense spiritual moment. That's fucking comical to me. To me, that would be like filming or live streaming a ritual. You got to look at it in that light. It takes away, to me, the sanctity and the pureness of the energy of that ritual. So look at it in that regards. Don't just look at it on the surface, because it can be presented a different way. Now, again, if you don't feel that that's the case, that's up to you. I can only speak for myself. So, give me a hug, buddy. Going to bed? All right, I'm trying to stay in there tonight, right? Well, see you later. Bye. So yeah, I can only speak for myself. I wouldn't do it. It's just me. Sister Oni, hey everybody, I'm late, but I'm here. Oh, get your ass up, sleeping. All right, what else we got? Yeah, it's a good comment by Oni. I think my guides and Orishi would be insulted if I tried to record them with a nanny cam. Well, it's funny you bring that up, because, and you know this, and others that might be in that system, that's something that's completely looked down upon. Like, you're not supposed to take images or pictures, and it's not from a religious sense, not the ones that promote it on that. I know my godmother, for example, would never do that because, again, for that reason, some things need to stay the sanctity needs to be preserved. The energy of that, needs to be preserved. And I mean, you have a lot of traditionalists in that on that spiritual system that they're totally against it for that, for tradition. I mentioned a while back, there's a Facebook page, and man, they attack people for doing that shit on there. It's called Santeros Exposed. And you'll see a bunch of videos on there, people doing Palo rituals. It's fucking hilarious. Filming possessions at Bembe's. And the Facebook page is geared at, attacking that, right? And rightfully so. But some of the videos are comical. You can tell the people are acting and playing for the camera. It's fucking hilarious. They got one video on it, and I think one of you saw it and emailed me about it. They got some spiritualist. He's doing a cleansing on the Spanish chick. And if you ever been in the Botanicas, they got these like spiritual sprays, they call them. And he's got the... If I find a video, I might pull it up and put it on. It's fucking hilarious. You hear him, he's saying all these prayers in Spanish, Christian prayers, and then he takes the spray. It looks like he's killing fucking roaches. He sprayed this chick down like it's the funniest shit, and it's all, she's all acting for the camera. It's comical, and there's actually a couple of the Santeros on there I actually know. Two of them are from New York. And as I said, a lot of that spiritual system is passed from mouth to ear, and they really, the ones that are really tight knit, they're about keeping that amongst themselves. They just don't. And I personally am in agreement with that. I just don't think you commercialize shit like that. Because to me, it's a mockery, and to me, it's like, when I saw that video, I was cracking up because I was like, you could tell this shit is fake. All right. It's just the only types in my circle is like a Cheerio nowadays. You're going to find out. I'm going to tell you, and I mentioned this many times over the last couple of years in videos. As you grow on this path, you're going to find your circle gets smaller and smaller because you start to rid yourself of things you just are not productive for you, that you don't really want to connect with anymore. And that's everything. People, places, things, things you used to do, you find yourself not doing anymore because you realize they're not as productive, for you. You start to disassociate yourself with certain social circles you might have been in. So you're going to find that's normal on this path, for your circle to get smaller and smaller. It is. We've talked many times before in the past that it can be a lonely path, but not in a bad way. Because once you start tapping into that, quote unquote, what we call the isolated consciousness, you just look at things differently. You just don't feel the same about certain things. And I've talked about that before, that a lot of people that first come on the path in the first year or so go through a traumatic experience with that. I've had people tell me, there's moments they feel like being around a lot of people, then there's moments they don't want to be bothered by nobody. That's how, intense it can be. I just want to make that clear. That's how intense it can be. That's how drastic the change can become. So this is why when you always hear me saying, be prepared for the change that comes along with being on this path, I don't think people get fully invested in what that means, or they understand it, because they sometimes come in with a preconceived notion of how that change is going to be and how it's going to come about and how it's going to affect them. You can't possibly really, really fully grasp and predict that. You'd be foolish if you thought, because you're going to be bringing stuff to the surface that you were not aware of that was there. And that's going to be part of the process that brings about the change. So you have to understand that. That's very important. And I've seen it. I'm telling you, I've seen it. I'm sure we all have in certain people. I've watched it, and people just misgauged it. So Be prepared for that change, not the change you want, but the change you need. It's two different things. Yeah, Mama Workday typed in. Mom always said you'd be lucky if you end up with one friend for the rest of your life. Good thing I don't believe in luck. Yeah, I mean, a lot of shit I reflect back now on what my mother said, and it's kind of funny because, when we were kids and we were young, we were dumb, we always, like, damn, thought our parents was annoying. And I find out a lot of the shit that my parents were saying back then when I was young and dumb were true. All right, then Sister Sony topic. Yet identify strategy is very important. Shit, my bad. Hold on. You know what I usually do? Take that little leap, did that little jumpy jump. Hold on. Let me go back, find a spot. They need to do something on this chat where it doesn't do that, where you could freeze it or some shit. It just seems like when you scroll down and then you get to like the bottom, if you don't like move it right away, it just goes pew. This fucking skips. All right, I think I left right. Okay, right here. All right, so someone said, can you, identified strategy is very important. Can you use either based on what you're trying to achieve? I want to make sure I understand that question. Maybe it was the way it was worded, but when I was talking about earlier, you need to have a strategy on the approach to everything you do. What's your strategy? Like, my whole thing is somebody that comes on this path, especially somebody new or a new client I'm doing a consultation for, because I get this email all the time, I'm new to this path and I'm really interested in blah, I get this email all the time. Some of you that have sent me that email, you're still here today and you still do work with me today. But then there's the ones who thought they wanted to be on this path because they didn't really have that strategy or they didn't have a plan. Because one of the first questions I like to ask a brand spanking new person is, all right, so what, outside of the regular, hey, so what got you interested in this path? All right, they tell you the basic, I started studying this, I looked into that. But then the second question, not everybody really answers it that clear. So what are you trying to accomplish? What's your intent? Well, we could say strategy or plan. Never really a clear cut answer, kind of, nonchalant, kind of all over the place type of thing. And to me, that could be a problem. And the only answer I look for, not saying that you have to give me the answer that I'm looking for, but you should, quote unquote, have a response and something to developing yourself and making yourself a better person. Something in regards to that, not because you want all the external and the materialistic shit, and that's part of it, but there should be some answer in accordance with that. So sometimes that can be an issue, but you should have a strategy, an intent, a plan. You should be trying to achieve some type of goal, period. All right, so only typed in. I think my shadow came back. I've been feeling like I have company in my bed at night and waking up sweaty. Yeah, you probably had some company in your bed. That's why I stopped. I tried the commanding, but I'm not getting anything but the bed creaking loudly thoughts. I mean, that's personal, and it's some blockage obviously there. If you're saying you're not getting nothing from the commanding, when I say there's some fear there, I'm not talking about fear where you're so scared that you're running, but you're preventing something from not allowing that commanding to work. So you're putting up some type of mental fear blockage that's why it's not working. Now, the question is, what is it and why? The best simple method of something like that is, go into a visualization, of when that happens and what you feel like. And what I would basically do in something like that, where you can kind of place yourself in the scenario where you feel the shadow and, kind of dictate the outcome as far as not, what I mean dictate the outcome is when you're commanding, when it's happening and it's not working, create a visualization when you're commanding and it is working. And you'll find out, because you're more engulfed with what the elements that's happening through the experience, you're not focused and your concentration is out of whack. And this is why when you're doing the commanding, you're not getting the results. And like you say, you describe here in the bed creaking, but trust me, it's all up here. So I would go into some type of work in regards to that. All right, what else we got? Well, asset could be, if you try to synchronize asset with one of the Orishi, it could actually be a couple. Obviously, there's characteristics of Yemaya, the mother in nature of Yemaya, that would connect with asset. There's aspects of Oya, the darker side, and some of the aspects of Oshun. But they would probably be some of the three archetype or character types that you would find, because in all three of them, you see the lighter, more spiritual, motherly goddess aspect, but then you also see the dark sorceress slash intense aspect of asset that we're talking about here in the Asetian Bible. Because remember, when we just went through the three bloodlines, they are the three bloodlines that represent that darker side of asset. We broke those three down. We tend to, on this path, now we do, for an example, on the Necro Minion book, there's a lot of work incorporating the triad of light and darkness, and asset is a key component in that triad of light. But we focus more, excuse me again, I apologize. I've been up since 4 a.m., so I apologize for the yawning, but can't help it. We're focusing more on the darker aspect of asset on this path. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, we focused on the aspect of her of a dark goddess, right? And when you say correlating into Orishi, I would just look at there's a couple, and the three that I mentioned, that darker side of asset to me shows up in Oya, because Oya can be destructive. Asset can be very destructive if provoked, contrary to how she's always presented as this, I don't want to say submissive, but docile, motherly nature goddess. And that's part of her nature. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the only part. All right. All right, what else we got? Yeah, Destiny and the A-base types I'm always wrong. I mean, everything that Brother B is saying is what you say, to especially negativity, sound mind, and body. Number one, sound mind mostly. Yes, I mean, I was talking about that earlier, sound mind and body, because if the mind is sound, the body's automatically going to be sound with it, because you'll start making, more correct decisions in the physical. But sound mind, again, got to be careful. We'll use terms like insane or that person's crazy. We have to be careful when we say that, because that's a matter of perception and opinion. Sound mind to me is somebody that is grounded. They have a good grasp of the physical, the objective, and they have a good grasp of the spiritual or the subjective. Where to me, somebody becomes not in a sound mind, I want to reiterate this, and I was talking about this earlier, is the motherfucker that wants to be so spiritual all the time. Everything is spiritual. You know, they're so holy and devout. They levitate and they fast and they're taking every herb in the book and they drink all these fucking seaweed and grass and lemons and sarsaparilla roots. You know, they're just so overly fucking spiritual that they're just not fucking grounded in reality. That's the person you got to be careful of. Usually, I'm not saying all the time, but I'm going to say 99.9% of the time, that's a person that is trying to escape reality. Okay, now it can work on the flip. You got somebody that's so physical that all they do, you know, is chase materialistic things and physical things, and they're so lacking in the spiritual that their life is miserable. These, you know, you see people throughout society, and I'm not just talking about entertainers and you know, athletes or rich people that we know in Hollywood. I'm talking about just say the average successful business person. Sometimes people have everything materialistically, yet they have nothing. You'll see they start to turn to drugs because they don't know what to do with all the money they have to do it themselves. And because they have no lack or sense of spirituality, they tend to gravitate to all physical things, leading to a downward spiral where it can lead to suicide, depression, just a whole, you know, drug abuse. There's that side to it too. Don't get me wrong. That's a reality that exists. But you're going to find on a lot of these spiritual paths. I'm going to just talk about this here. I mean, over my years being in, you know, comedic circles and all the other conscious quote unquote circles, I've ran into some motherfucking characters, man. I can't even describe to you. I could be here for hours telling you some fun. I walked in, cats talking about they seen deities come through the walls. They heard people talk. I mean, just look. I'm not saying that didn't happen. It's a subjective experience. The problem is they spend their time trying to convince people of their spooky bullshit. That's where it becomes a problem. So we must be in a sound mind. When carrying out any of this work, you must be in a sound mind. Okay. And when I say sound mind, that's having a good being in harmony with the physical and the spiritual. Not being so engrossed and you're so heavy spiritually, but your everyday life is fucked up. You can't pay your bills. You don't take care of your kids. Like I say, I don't respect any man that don't take care of his kids. I don't give a shit. And I'm saying this from experience with my oldest son's first mother. You know, rest in peace. I ain't gonna talk bad about her. I don't care what differences you have with your significant other. Vice versa. This goes for females too. Don't put kids in the middle of it because that's the problem that tend to happen too sometimes. But if you don't take care of your kids, I ain't got no respect for that shit. But I know cats that are so spiritual, so heavy and deep, but they can't even pay their child support. That's fucking comical to me. You're not a living example of the information you teach. And if you really understood what this path is about, even though you might have differences with your ex or significant other, you would be a mature, responsible adult and say, that ain't got nothing to do with the kids. So I've watched all these spiritual spooky cats, but yet their everyday life is a mess. It's comical. You understand? Yes, and that's a phrase you'll hear, something that Duma Ken typed in. All truth is half truth, and that's true because there's two sides, or well, I don't know, actually more than that. Truth can be perceived on a multitude of levels, and that's why I say truth is personal. And that truth is confirmed when the individual raises themselves up to reality. That truth, that's when it becomes real truth. You understand? Because it becomes personal, and in that personal confirmation, it becomes a reality. And people are going to perceive truth on a multitude of different levels. Okay. Sister Sonia Tyson, truth is relative. How you relate to it. True indeed. What else we got here? Yeah, there's a good comment by Sister Oni. First, you got to face your weaknesses and fears. A lot of people love the lies. Yes, because remember, that ties into the concept of how we avoid facing our weaknesses and fears is when you always hear me talking about the concept that people spend most of their lives portraying themselves how they want people to see them, which is not who they really are, right? So they spend a lot of people, invest a lot of time and energy in their life trying to portray a certain image that they're trying to get across to people, and it's not really them. If they rid themselves of all that bullshit, all those lies and illusions that they created about themselves, and really got down to the core essence of who they really are, themselves, they would find out it'd be a lot easier to address those things as opposed to burying them, hiding them, and avoiding them, because that's where the bullshit comes in. So yeah, you will find that most people will take the approach not to even attempt to do that, but they have plenty of time and energy to do the latter, unfortunately. So yeah, and as I said before, that's one of the first steps. You should be when people say, "Oh, you start coming on this path and doing work." Well, what should I start with? Well, that's the best place to start, right? You can't go into the heavier work of bringing about tremendous change or handle, the bigger problems without first addressing that. Because if you're not right, how are you going to bring about any change if you're not right yourself? So not only can you not bring change to others, you can't bring change to yourself. It just doesn't work. Now, people call it shadow work. That's the term you'll hear in a lot of these spiritual circles. Yes, if you want to call it shadow work, that's what it is. Your shadow self, all those things. That's where you always want to start, because once you got yourself in order, then you can be effective to yourself and everything that filters out from yourself. Until you do that, you can't bring about no change, because that's like going to do a tremendous ritual on finances, but you're all jacked up. You got so much emotional and spiritual baggage that you haven't even addressed, but you think you're going to carry out some intense, heavy, deep ritual to bring about great financial change, or we're just using that as an example. It's not going to work. I can tell you that shit right now. Until you do the first. Trust me when I tell you. What else we got? Only types of ancestors are the foundation of any spiritual system. Step-away type said, can any of the bloodlines be used for healing self or others if need be? Actually, any three of them, because you'll find all three of them practice an aspect of healing energy. Now, the Viperines, you got to be careful when using that technique, because they're more predatory by nature. They tend to suck a lot more energy, and it can be a lot more draining. But there's techniques. Actually, I'll find it in the actual book. I can get the page if you don't have the book. Where is it? And actually, I know, Steppenwhite, you're in the class, so we will be going over a lot more in depth. You can go into section 3, energy work, which begins on healing on page 203. If you have the book, gets into what you're talking about. Yes, you can use this technique for not just healing yourself, healing others. Also in the second Mapet book, there's techniques of how you can astrally project yourself and heal others. Actually, this is something we learn in the Rosicrucian order in the temple degrees, how we can heal people even from far distances, and they don't even need to be right in front of us. So you can project that healing energy within great distances where the individual is nowhere in front of you. You can do it face to face. There's a way of transferring that energy or this prana that we talk about into water and having an individual ingest that water. That can create a healing force or a healing energy. So there's many different techniques. The transferring in water is very effective, and I've tried that a couple of times over the years with a couple of different individuals that were dealing with ailments. But obviously, again, you must be, in order for that energy transference to be correct, you must be, again, in a sound mind, sound body. If you're fucked up and infected with all types of bullshit, why would you want to transfer, quote unquote, some type of healing energy to somebody? So you got to be careful with that. One, when you're doing it for others, this is one of the key rules to follow in this practice. You have to make sure that they're aware. You need to let them know that they're aware. You never want to astrally project yourself against the will of an individual. Now, when you're doing destructive magic or performing an attack, that's a whole different story, which I'm not going to really get into detail here. But I'm talking about when you're doing techniques like that, healing, you should definitely let the individual know because it helps them to be more open and receptive. It's not as effective when you're doing it and they don't know, because then you have to, not saying that you can't do it, but then you have to really, enforce an even stronger energy because of that fact or that factor, I should say. So the answer to your question, yes, you can, not just yourself, also others. Your sister's only typing, the more I work with my ancestors, the more I uncover shit about myself. And I was saying that earlier. And that might have been in relation when I was talking about it earlier. You will, because remember, the ancestors are the groundwork to all of these spiritual systems. They bring a newfound awareness. They just link you in naturally. Your thinking becomes more clearer. Your intuition becomes a lot more sharper. You always seem to be guided in the areas and the directions you needed to be because you've opened that bloodline connection. Yet when you open yourself up to that DNA connection of your ancestral bloodline, it's a whole different experience. And remember, I said, even on this path, whether it's Michael W. Ford's books, Father Sebastian, Louis Marquez, and this book here, they all agree in this spiritual system, even if you've ever performed a vampiric mass individually by yourself, or if you've ever done it collectively, you will see it's very ancestral in nature, because there's always that honoring and respecting the ancestors. Well, look, the term here is ancestral, the bloodlines, right? We went through the bloodlines. What does that mean? That's ancestral in nature. So what it's telling you, these were the three ancestral bloodlines of Aset, in tracing the spiritual practice on back to ancient Egypt. That's what we went over. So you're seeing the core elements of ancestral reverence right here in this spiritual practice. And again, I mean, the way I have, my altar, set up and how I honor and reverence my ancestors, I have spirit guides in one section, bloodline ancestors and implements in one section. I have them categorized, but I know how to facilitate and work with them. So also understand your bloodline ancestors and your ancestral spirit guides, because they work in conjunction, in unison with each other. They open yourself up, quote unquote, to the spiritual world. You understand? Along with the gateway keepers and the crossroad deities, such as Papa Legba, Santa Muerte, Anpu. All those archetypes represent that energy, right? And different characteristics. So by all means, all that stuff is connected. All right. Yes, Mama Muerte. I'm looking forward to working with my personal daemon moving forward soon after Ancestors. Very excited. Yeah, for those that are in the session now, you know what work you're in between doing. You're getting ready to do that work. And I know you're in the session, so you know what I'm talking about. And that's what it's about. It's about carrying out the work, not just about reading it and talking about shit that you like and That's all great. But without any working results, this shit is all pointless. Without bringing about any regular change in your life on all levels, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. See, that's the areas I work on. Like I said, when I look at myself, engage myself, I always set these, you always hear me talking about short-term goals. Every 6 months, I take an assessment. Has there been change and growth from today and 6 months ago? I can say, consistently, I see some change. It's going to fluctuate on levels, but there should be some change. You should be able to look back and go, yeah, I changed in that area. I don't do that no more. I'm doing this now. This area I was struggling with or lacking, I've seen the growth and the change. I'm just giving examples. There always should be some type of change. You should always be striving to evolve the best you can be as a person, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Now, the physical part, let's not negate that. I want to talk about that real quick. We talked about sound mind. We talked about sound body, which is true. But part of that sound body, physically, you should be taking care of yourself as best as you can. That can affect your concentration and the spiritual aspect of your nature, and the spiritual aspect of your evolution and growth. We should be exercising, regularly, things of that nature. Trying, and I know it's tough because I struggle with that in areas. Sometimes with not eating the right foods. I mean, you got to be careful because some people can be promoted as extreme as a religion, and a lot of it's common sense. So let's not negate some of the basics, which is very important. You definitely need to, to the best of your ability, take care of yourself. Most people don't, unfortunately. They want to get reap all the heights in the spiritual benefits, but yet they're not taking care of themselves physically. Now, again, nobody's perfect. And you got to remember, you're trying to obtain a certain level of harmony and unison with all these things in conjunction. You're never going to look, if you think you're going to wake up one day and everything's just going to be perfect, you ain't never going to have no problems. You're completely fucking delusional. This is not a path that promotes that or teaches that. It's a path that shows you how you can keep all those things in order and function, and how you can work in harmony for the most part, where the things that are not conducive for you are not consuming it. Because when you're struggling with all those things and you don't have no control over them, then they consume you. So this path doesn't promote that you're going to get up one day, you're not going to have any financial problems. You're not going to have no personal problems or family problems. That is just the most delusional bullshit. It teaches you, we could call it chaos if we want. The chaos will always be present, but the god or the goddess knows how to make order out of that chaos. So this is where we apply the concept of Set, right? And we look at that symbolic story where Set was able to keep Apep under control, whereas Ra couldn't, right? Because Ra took the wrong approach. Ra tried to fight it off and avoid it and keep it, at bay, whereas opposed to Set embraced it. And rather than Set try to not deal with it, he embraced it and was able to make order out of that. Well, that's why we say Set, and I don't like to call Set anymore the Prince of Darkness. I call him the King of Darkness. That's what makes him more unique than any other deity or archetype in ancient Egypt. There's none like Set. I don't give a fuck. You can go to any of them deities. When you look at what Set represents, it's unique in itself because he was a nonconformist. So how can you have a Set mindset, let's say when we were talking about earlier, and be exclusive to one thing? Then you don't know what the isolated consciousness is about. You don't know what the gift of Set really represents if you want to be exclusive to one thing. That's why when we were talking about those things earlier, that's not what this path is about. Because one of the key aspects of the isolated consciousness and what Set represents is not being a nonconformist. So when you become exclusive to one thing, whether you may not look at it like that on the surface, you have now become a conformist because you have conformed. And like I say, that goes against what the path of self-mastery represents, because the only thing you're really mastering is whatever specific spiritual system you want to become exclusive to, whether that's voodoo, hoodoo, or whatever the fuck it might be. That's just totally an opposite or opposition of what the isolated consciousness represents, what the gift of Set represents. Now, for an example, and it's funny how all this stuff comes up and it's in unison with the work we're getting ready to do. The ritual that we're getting ready to perform at the end of the month it's funny because you guys are bringing questions up tonight that are going to connect to the 19 parts of the eternal word of Set. It addresses all of this shit that we're talking about tonight. And that's why, like I say, you know, and I say it just joking around, having fun. That's why I say Set's the man. Set's the motherfucking man. And I say king of darkness, not the prince of darkness, because that would be belittling. I just say king because it's just a higher terminology, right? And I had to catch myself in my work because that's how I feel now as I start working with the energy of Set. I realized the prince saying the prince of darkness to me is lessening the power of what that energy and that archetype represents. I say king or ruler, right? In relationship to self, because when you're tapped into that Set energy, you are now the king and the ruler over self. Whereas when you're not tapped into the isolated consciousness, you're not king and ruler over yourself or queen and ruler over yourself. You're a conformist. You can fall for anything. You can create illusions and delusions and think it's the right thing to do. But like I said, I also have to use the aspect of approaching it from a Luciferian mentality and mindset. I also understand that though there are going to be those that don't agree with my approach to things, just like everybody else has to, I get that. But I also understand that I have the right to agree to disagree with that approach. And if you look at it from that Luciferian perspective, because if you say in nature, we should always approach this path from a Luciferian mindset. And Luciferians are the furthest thing from nonconformists. A Luciferian would never exclusively conform to one particular thing. All right, that's religion. All right, so what else we got? My birthday type saying, ever since I've moved forward onto this path, I can't stand being around people. It's very draining. From being such a doors open, come on in, everyone's my friend, let's chill, I'm good. And I found that too over the years. As I get older, the less people I want to be around. Now, I like being around certain people, especially people in small groups on this path and those that have come down here and done work. It's a good energy. We have fun with it. But there's times where I just go through periods, I don't want to be bothered the same way. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't look at that as a bad thing. Look at it, again, as being connected and linked into that isolated consciousness of Set. That's how you got to look at it. That's not a bad thing. Don't look at it as it being an introvert, right? Society creates all these terms to make it look or make it appear as something not good. You're going to find that that's a common thing on this path. You're going to find a lot of people experience that. And, like Sister Oni mentioned earlier too, your circle becomes very small. And as you grow, because you tend to not want to be around people of like mind and like energy. I've also found something that I struggled on this path dating years back. I mean, probably most of the people, let me put it this way, probably people 10 years ago, I'll go back as little as 10 years. I probably don't even associate or talk to anybody I was talking to 10 years ago. That's how drastic your circles can change in periods, because you tend not to want to be around, again, like mind and like energy. So that's completely normal. And know this, that's something that constantly happens in periods, and it fluctuates. Ah, shit. Hold on 1 second. Shit, when I'm haywire on me again. Okay. Got it. Okay, so Gilberto, I see you addressed further my question from earlier. Okay, yeah, you can't give a shit what people say or think about you. I really couldn't give a fuck. As I said, and I say this with all due respect, when this camera goes off, this shit is a memory to me. Okay, I do not sit around giving two flying fucks who likes me, who hates me, who loves me, who appreciates me. I mean, I appreciate it when, like for an example, brother Phil sent me an email. He was one of the brothers that emailed me in the last few days, and Phil's on his own path, and he just simply, and sometimes you need that, it motivates you. He just simply say, appreciates all the information and the work. So I'm not saying I don't appreciate when somebody appreciates, because sometimes we just need to be told that. Sometimes, just in life in general, it's the little things. Sometimes we don't stop and just say to loved ones or siblings, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do. Not this false illusionary aspect of what we call love. Because when you say to somebody, and I want to make this clear, when you say to somebody you love them, don't confuse that for that you love what they do for you. You see, young-minded people find that out the hard way, because when you look at your significant other, can you really say you love them, or do you love what they do for you? Or is it both? I can say, I can answer that. I mean, again, that's not a question for everybody to answer openly, and I'm not going to answer it. I'm just saying something to give you to think about. I'm saying within myself, I can clearly answer that question without any hesitation. Because think about this for a minute, if the person you with stopped doing what they were doing for you, would you still feel the same way? So you never thought about it like that. Because sometimes, I always ask this when I get mail, when I'm dealing with a male client, right? And they got to stop and think about it for a minute. If your wife stopped cooking and cleaning and taking care of your kids, would you still feel the same way? Probably not. We need to understand those aspects, because sometimes you're dealing with, when relationships and significant others, you're dealing with more so you're in love with the fact of what you get out of it for self, as opposed to, are you working collectively? Now, it's personal. It's going to vary from individual to individual. I want to get into that. I want to open that can of worms, but that's part of addressing some of the shit that you deal with. And I found that can be something that holds people back. You understand? But yeah, the last thing you want to care, and you hear me, you go back to videos from way back. That's one thing you also must, one of the first type of work you have to master and get over on when you first come on this path is stop worrying about what people think about you. It's irrelevant, because you're always going to have your naysayers. You're always going to have your critics. You're always going to have, especially people that are not on this path, that are religious, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. Like, oh, what kind of shit are you into? You understand? And that shit is irrelevant. That, like I say, I gave that shit up years ago. I can't even, it's been a minute. I couldn't care. And all I got to say is this: if people that talk shit, if they can't say it to your face, they ain't nothing but punk bitches anyway. I don't play the bitch hoe shit. The hearsay, he say, she say shit. That's high school little kiddie drama. You understand? We're grown ass adults. If you can't talk to me adult to adult, then I'm just going to let you wallow in your stupidness. And it's even like here, when you make yourself subjective and open on the platform, you see occasionally, once in a blue moon, you get some asshole that comes in the room, thinks they know everything, some comedic coon because they got an Egyptian name and they read a few books and they sat down and watched a few lectures on Sodnet or TV, so you can't tell them nothing no more. They think they know everything. Why rip motherfuckers like that apart on a daily basis? Like I say, I've done it in the past. I'll bring a motherfucker like that to tears when need be, because that's when the arrogance of an individual or the ego gets the best of that individual. And sometimes, I'm not saying, because remember, the first aspect of Viperines, remember, they're predatory by nature. And that's one of the paths that I probably utilize the most out of those three. Predators attack when they're provoked. You understand? So when you're attacking in that method, you're not giving a shit about what they're saying. You're trying to destroy what they're saying. But I will only retaliate if pushed in that regards. But in relation to your question or to your comment, Gilberto, that's correct. You should not give a fuck about what anybody thinks. Who gives a shit? Because you know what? At the end of the day, Here's something I live by. If you ain't giving me no pussy or paying my bills, I couldn't give a fuck what you got to say. It's irrelevant to me. Because what you got to say, if it's not affecting my livelihood, it's irrelevant. The only way I'm going to have to step to your ass is if you're affecting my livelihood and you're in my lane and fucking with what I'm doing. Then I need to step to your ass. You understand? But if you're just talking, say, oh, I don't like that motherfucker. Or I don't, he did this, or he did that, little bitch shit. I don't care. That shit's relevant. Because you know what? It's not affecting my pockets and you ain't giving me no pussy. So I don't give a fuck. So that shit is irrelevant. So you can keep that nonsense over there, that little kindergarten, elementary, high school shit, that little immature shit, keep that shit over there. It's irrelevant. All right. Destiny types and Brother B, so right about the social circle I've been living in. Yeah. And again, I don't know exactly how old you are, Destiny. I'm not just, June passed a few months ago, but I turned 47. I'm finding out as the older I get, the less tolerance I have for bullshit nonsense, the less tolerance I have for people I don't want to be around. And I'm finding out as I get older, like Oni said, the circle gets the size of a Cheerio. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. That's the way I like it. Because in order to fully grow and flourish on this path, you have to eliminate all of the excess shit that's holding you back. And that includes people and things and habits and character, all of those things. That's part of doing the internal work. What habits do you have that's fucking you up, holding you back? Because look, I deal with this all the time. When I have regular clients that their lives are screwy and they're always blaming some bullshit, first thing I ask them, let's do a detailed, summary of, let's start with your social circles. A lot of these people that struggle and have problems, like most of them are in socials, they're hanging out with derelicts and lowlives, right? And we were talking about earlier comments that our mothers used to say to us, like wise words of wisdom from mama. Well, one thing my mother used to always say to me growing up as a kid, I told you, I mentioned this before in videos, I bring a certain friend into the house, my mother would just go, I don't like that motherfucker for some reason, because that motherly instinct, right? That motherly intuition. And my mother would always make this statement, you are the company you keep, right? We've probably heard that. That's a famous statement. But that's something my mother used to say to me all the time growing up. Remember, you are the company you keep. If you're hanging around derelicts and lowlives, though you might think in your mind you're not, you eventually become that. You don't have a choice. If you're hanging around unproductive, unsuccessful people, guess what? You will become an unproductive, unsuccessful person. So social circles, and that's why I said we got to also address the physical. Social circles are important. The company you keep is relevant, because it's a representation and a reflection of who and what you are. I'm not saying in a society aspect where you need to keep company that people regard in a certain standard. That's not what I mean. I'm saying you need to keep company that's productive to your path and what you're trying to accomplish. That's why I said I like to keep the company of like-minded individuals and like energy individuals. Look, like I can't do the shit I used to do years ago. Like I like to go out and have fun, but it's in a more certain restricted environment now. I don't like to go, like I can't go to these young boy clubs anymore. I just ain't got the, I can't be around that nonsense no more. If I'm going to go out to a place like that, it's got to be a mature crowd, more sociable. Like I'll do the old school thing or something like that, whatever. But it's got to be something that's conducive, again, of like mind and like energy. So your social circles are going to drastically change. I can tell you when you come on this path, I guarantee you, if you stay on this path, I will bet you, if you came on this path today and you stayed on for 2 to 3 years, I guarantee you won't have any of the friends that you first came on this path with. One, you're going to lose some because they're going to think you're crazy. What are you into? You're into some occult devil worship shit. Two, because of your energy is gravitating and your vibration and frequency is going one way, other people's are going another way. So it's just a natural instinct. You're just going to start to move apart. You'll also find out and I always said this, if you're in a relationship, and I'm not saying both people need to be exactly the same, so left-hand path, dark and occultic, but you at least have to be with an individual that has a certain level of understanding of the path. That will pose a problem and a fork in the road down there. Trust me when I tell you. I've seen this many times and over the years. You must be with an individual that at least understands it to a certain level, practices it to a certain level. I'm not saying they got to practice it to the extent you do, but at least have to have a grasp of what it is. And one, even if they don't go as deep as internal as you do, they at least have to understand and respect what you do. That's important. If you don't have that, it's going to pose another problem. Trust me when I tell you. So all the stuff we're talking about now would be ideas of how you do the internal work and getting yourself right. We're doing it right now, whether you realize it or not. See, this is the shit we just don't focus on and do. We want to skip all this and, tonight I'm going to do a levitation ritual. Get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. That's just, come on, stop. Don't make me laugh. All right. Sonia, Bloodlines. Can you use either multiple based on what you want to do? Most definitely. That's why I say, like, for an example, if you're going to get this book, and again, from day one, why I went to this book, one, like I say, brother Duma had brought it to my attention a couple months ago. And when he did, I had mentioned to him I had seen it, but I never got it. And there was another book, the Liber Orion, that I had seen by Louis Marquez, which I just ordered, actually. And I would suggest you guys get that. I saw that book also. I remember I stumbled across it on a website. I read the description and never ordered it. But when he brought it to my attention, I ordered it, and I see why. Because if somebody described to me what concept or aspect of vampirism I use, this would pretty much describe it. So the bloodlines and what they represent, most definitely, you're going to see a little bit of yourself in all three of them. More in others, less in some others, and vice versa. So the techniques you're going to find, what you gravitate and connect with, that's what you're going to naturally tend. And you can utilize that and address whatever it is you're trying to work with. That's entirely up to you. All right. Man, you in this creaky bed, man. You better tell that dude you got sleeping in that bed. You need to tell him you gotta get to getting when you. Somebody mentions Yamaya has a dark side as well. Let me say this, and I mentioned this before, not to get into a whole Rishi thing. Remember, if you really understand Ifa / Santeria, there's a simple book I recommended a couple months back. It's by Majin Gonzalez Whipler. It's called The Orishis. It's not a thick book. It's a little medium-sized book. I think it's like, I have it here. I just don't feel like pulling it out. I think it's like maybe 100 pages, a little bit over 100 pages. Why I suggested people to get that book in reference to Sonia's comment, it talks about briefly, it doesn't get super in-depth. It's a good book to give a good general understanding of the Orishi. It talks about each Orishi has multiple paths. Understand that. For an example, most people just identify with the Orishi on the surface of what they're known for. Like, Obatala is just purity and spirituality and holiness and healing. Yes, it is. But there's a warrior aspect of Obatala. There's a very aggressive aspect of Obatala. Yamaya, same thing. Oshun. There's a sorceress, dark, magical, or magic aspect of Oshun, just like there is Yamaya. Well, the book gets into those paths. It talks about them. Same thing with Elegua. There's a super trickster path of Elegua. There's a path of Elegua that creates problems for you just to see if you have the willpower and fortitude to overcome those problems. There's a path of Elegua that will put blockages intentionally there just to see how strong you are. And that's like what some people would call the trickster or the devil, right? I'm just giving you terms that is used in the tradition. But yes, you're going to find character types. Again, we get back into, there's many different character or archetypes when dealing with one particular Orishi. There's multiple paths. Yep. Yeah, that's Sonic types. And everyone treats that energy like the light energy of Asset. Yeah. And like I say, remember, this is called, right, the Asetian Bible. you're getting that this spiritual aspect of vampirism links into the dark goddess Aset in her darker, raw form and sorceress nature, right? Go back and review the Dark Kiss, go check it out and read it again. We went over it a few weeks ago. This is an aspect of Aset that you don't want to fuck with. That would be linked to those darker paths. This is an aspect of Aset that would be very, if I would synchronize this aspect of Aset, if you said, who would it really be likened to as far as another archetype from another spiritual system, I would say Kali. That's what this energy of Aset is very similar to. Kali, if you really want a description. Because remember, Kali is a vampire goddess. Go back into the Second Pet book. Aset is one of the, Kali is one of the highest or strongest female goddesses of vampirism. And this, if you told me what would this be closely synchronized with, I'd have to say Kali. That's the best way I could describe it. Yeah, Destiny, I feel you. 4 a.m. It's tough. It's a rough fucking thing, but you gotta do what you gotta do. You gotta make your money. Yvette, how do you find like-minded people? Excellent question. And the problem, we tend to make it complex. Okay, step one, okay, you gotta look first your surroundings. First analyze and look at who you have around you, right? It starts to naturally happen when you first and foremost remove those around you that are not of like mind, because you can't bring that like-minded energy around you when you're giving off a frequency and vibration that's in opposition to that. So if, for an example, you're on this path and say you're out and about and you're surrounded by 7-8 people that are not on this path, they completely somewhere else left field. The only energy that's being projected, seen, and felt is that dominating energy that you got around you. So they don't see the you and what you're projecting. Look at it like a magnet, right? What's like will naturally, it'll naturally attract itself, right? When you're blocking that by having shit around you that's not conducive to that, you automatically create a blockage. So that's the key. We're getting removing shit around you that's non-productive. Now, outside of that and the normal things of finding areas and study groups, like I told you, one good place you'll find, what's that shit? You gotta be careful with them things too. Meet up. You'll find there's some, you might find in your area there's some occult, study groups that get together. I told you a Gnostic Mass. Find a local OTO chapter or lodge near you. They have usually a public Gnostic Mass that non-members are also allowed to attend. You can meet people in circles and places like that. If you talk about the actual general things you can do, but I would focus more on the internal stuff. Like, it naturally just gravitates towards you when you get your shit in order. That's the key. No wisdom like mama wisdom. And that's another thing I don't respect. I can't stand seeing people disrespect their mother. That shit pisses me off. And I mentioned this before in the past. Yeah, I was super close with my mother, but that shit pisses me off, man. Just as bad as useless dudes that can't take care of their kids and pay child support. I can't stand this generation, when you see somebody out in public, like, disrespecting their mother. It's more fucked up when the mother allows it, but yeah, that's a whole other story. Yeah, that's a good comment by Gilberto. Having a sound mind, to me, means having your house in order. Yeah, and that's your physical house, your spiritual house, and your mental house. I agree. Harmony. Anarchy Zed, what's going on, brother? Yeah, I know you've been busy. I know you ain't been in a minute, but good to see you in here, brother. Good to see you. I hope everything is good. I know last time you said I know you had a little injury. I can't remember if that was recent or not too long ago. So I hope everything is good. Well, I know you typed this in a little while ago. I don't know if you're still eating, but enjoy your food, or hope you enjoyed your food. Because I know when I get my grub on, I don't want to be disturbed. Oh, foot. That's right. Sonya reminded me. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I hope your foot is okay. I remember you last time you were in here. I say your foot is healed up. It ain't even going to be right, though. I can't skate the same as before. I must. Well, there's a challenge for you. Since you love skating, what can you do to, improvise? That's a challenge in itself, to have a passion and a love for something and maybe not able to do it the way you used to. But that could also bring out a challenging aspect of you that can bring out some greatness in you. So, but I feel your pain. That would be, well, as long as you got, you got yourself in order, that's the key. Okay, good. No issues with the heart. That's good. Yeah, I mean, I'm doing good. I hope everybody else in here in the room tonight is doing good. And that, you know what? I'm glad you brings that up, and that's what I was saying earlier. Sometimes, you know what? We just don't, and we don't know how something so small goes a long way. We don't just stop and say to somebody, "Hey, man, how you doing?" Think about it for a minute. It's the simple things, right? Sometimes we just don't stop and ask somebody, "Hey, man, how's it going? How you doing? Is everything all right?" Though, we may not be able to fix and correct whatever problems or things that individual is doing, but sometimes it's just the intent of the thought, you know. And sometimes it's just the dialogue that you open up. And sometimes the individual just needs an outlet to dialogue, because in itself that creates and fluctuates a healing type of vibration of frequency. We've lost that as a society, and why we've lost it. And you always hear me talk about this off and on. This has become our virtual reality now. We're so disconnected from real world. We were talking about this last week, how, I know we were kicking it last week and talking about back in the day shit, and I've always been stressing the human experience, and that human interaction has been lost on so many levels, man. Because society has changed so greatly in the last 25 to 30 years. It's become so technologically advanced. There's an upside to it and there's a downside to it. The downside is it's just disconnected us from that human reality, unfortunately. So sometimes little shit like that goes a long way. When you see somebody, man, we can sometimes sense when somebody's going through it. Just say, "Hey, man, how you doing, man? Everything all right?" You're not creating the false promise that you're going to fix all their problems, but sometimes they might just need to get something off their chest, and they ain't got nobody to get it off their chest to. That's important. Focus on some of them things, because that in itself is doing work on this path. Because remember, I said earlier, this path is not only just about you. It is, but it isn't. But it's not, because it's how you interact with nature and individuals and things in your environment. That all has to be conducive and in harmony with self. So it's important to understand that also with how you reach out and your interaction with others. That's important. Don't negate it. Don't think it's something minute, because when that aspect is lost or it's not functioning, it can affect you too. It can affect you too, because, like I say, it can disconnect you from the human aspect of things. Remember, there is a human part of us. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. I don't care. I don't advocate any of them systems that say disconnect yourself from your human, your mortality. That's all that. I want to be super deep and spiritual bullshit. If that's the case, motherfucker, stop paying your mortgage. Stop paying your rent. Your ass will be out on the street. If you need to connect yourself from being mortal and human and materialistic, stop paying your fucking bills and see what's gonna happen. That's all bullshit. All right. But anyway. Oh wow. Okay. Be 32 on Christmas for sure. Too young, but I was only born
with half a heart. Still got just half. They trying to transplant me. Well, let's hope you get that transplant. Wow. All right. Well, it's good to hear you ain't had no issues, etc. for the time being. That's good to hear, brother. Into a comment I had made earlier, Destiny says, has there been any change or growth? Yes, I ask myself that every day. You should, because you should always gauge and critique yourself and gauge your results. If you don't do that, how are you going to know you're growing and changing? How are you going to know what you're doing is productive and working? If you're just doing it and not being real with yourself and going, all right, I've been doing this particular practice or whatever for less than nothing's happening. So now you got to address it and come up with a new plan, a new change. So we must do that to ourselves, because that's what keeps us sharp. That's what keeps us growing. And that's what's going to bring about the change, right? Yeah, Mama Morta, I know you can say that last 6 months. Right, and anarchy's that in relation to taking care of yourself. Like, well, yeah, like you say, it's easy to drink daily and smoking the cigarettes and all that. And I feel you, but at least you're recognizing it and you're making efforts to change in some capacity. That's the key. All right, where we at? Okay, I found my spot. Yeah, well, as long as we can give you some type of support, brother. Yeah, it's good. This is actually a good comment by Shamanic Mystic One. He says, "Peace, King. Please let people know that you can have bloodline ancestors of different races." And this is true. Let me explain this. I've mentioned this over the years. That want to work their magic through you, and you shouldn't pick one over the other based on race. That's very important. You will find out. I can tell you people that, over the years, matter of fact, one brother that you see in the videos all the time with me, brother Seth Atman, who you know is brother Mike. He found out years back that he had a spirit of a Scottish man. The spirit would always manifest itself, and that's what happened at some of the Egon rituals we would do. He would always manifest himself, and he found out that he was Scottish and quote unquote he was European. Now, understand, I talked a little bit, I think it was last week, about reincarnation, past lives. Also, understand when you're dealing with the spirit and you're working magic and you're dealing with some of these spiritual practices, all that race shit is irrelevant. It's hard for some people to stomach. But remember, I've talked about many times over the years that in order for you to really grow, you must connect with all of those energies and aspects of your bloodline, not just the ones you like. Because if all of us did a DNA test, I don't care how dark skinned you are and how fair skinned you are, you're going to find both. Dark skinned people will pull bloodline and they will see some European in their bloodline. So you're going to find out that you have spirits that are connected to you by bloodline, quote unquote, that may be of another race that you're not. And you might be hard to phantom that and understand that, but that's a fucking reality. So when you're able to identify, the more you also must acknowledge and embrace that part of your ancestry. So that I want to make that crystal clear. And I've talked about that many times over the years. So know that, and that's a good point by a shamanic mystic, that you need to, for sure, if you have been made aware of that connection, you need to embrace that and work with it. Oh, shit. This is going here. Anarchy's in. Had a talk with the chaplain or priest at the hospital and ICU. Fucked them off. I think
Oh, this chick was an ex-Buddhist that converted to Christianity. Wow. See, when you find somebody that, I mean, all right, not that Buddhism is like, well, you do that. But Buddhism, obviously, for, on the surface would be a more superior or a more in tune spiritually doctrine than Christianity. But how does one revert and go back? See, what happens is when people go into these spiritual systems that's not considered mainstream in society as being the norm, they get to some point where they struggle, get spooked or scared, and then they go back to something safe like Christianity. That doesn't surprise me. Well, that's good. I mean, and like you say, you weren't disrespectful. There's no need to be. If you're building with somebody, like I say, those that want it and you're building with them and you can maintain that line of respect, that's a good thing. As long as they ain't disrespecting you and you ain't got to bring that can of whoop ass out. So that's a good thing. Yeah, like I was talking about earlier. No, I mean, I'll get a few knuckleheads. I mean, really, I can't complain. I've only over the last couple of years, I might have got a couple of emails here and there. It's funny. I like how I get emails. I've had a couple. I mean, I could probably count them literally on one hand. I don't get too many of the knuckleheads, but occasionally I've entertained them on here and challenged them, and they disappear. Once you start addressing their dumb shit, they just fucking disappear. I get emails, and they're long and detailed. I get them from people that are so shocked about the videos and can't believe this now. But the funny thing is, they sure as hell send me this long email, and they sure as hell watched a lot of videos, and they know them in detail. And what they're not really saying is, and I'll respond back simple, say, it seems like to me that I struck a nerve and brought some type of something to your attention that you're struggling with. And instead of you exploring that, you're trying to be aggressive and retaliate. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And I find that funny. I got one email from a sister like 2 years ago. She must have quoted over 20, 30 videos. And I simply responded. I said, man, for somebody that is so detested by the channel, you spend a lot of time watching my videos. And I told her, I said, maybe I'll visit you. She blocked me after that. I said, maybe I'll visit you in your dreams one night. I just had a little fun with her, but anyway. Yeah, habits. There's good habits and there's bad habits in reference to Destiny's comment. Good habits can be productive when you start having good habits and practices. But when you're a bad habit, and when I say bad, I say it in the sense bad for your growth. That can be something that can be stagnated. When it becomes something that consumes you, controls your life, or distracts you from doing, your daily responsibilities or getting things done, that can be classified as a bad habit to you, the individual. So that's also part of the internal work. You need to look at the things you do, your behaviors, your habits, which ones are conducive and which ones are, they're stagnating. You're not growing, or it's stunting your growth. You got to be real with yourself in that department. And we call that on this path taking a stock or an inventory of ourselves. So that's important. And you got to be real with yourself about that. And that's not easy. That's not hard to identify. It's very easy, right? We might want to try to avoid it or pretend it is. If you sat down and be real with yourself, you could probably go through a list of shit and say, look, I know I'm doing this shit regularly. It's fucking me up. I know this is something good that I'm doing, so I'm going to keep at it. But let me focus on some of this shit here that's fucking me up. Be real with yourself, okay? Because that's the only thing you can be real with, all right? And that's true. Good comment by Ammon Blackstone. Peace, brother. The only quality people the company you keep is important. And that's true. And again, even the people that you might have in your circle that quote unquote, you can still keep quality people in your circle that quote unquote ain't officially on this path. So let me make that clear. And I got good friends. Like here's the best way to adjust your social circle. I got a circle of friends that I'll go out to sporting events with. I deal with them just on sports because that's the common ground. And it's funny because I'll just gravitate towards them in times when it deals with sports, right? Then you might have circles for this type of work. Then you might have circles on another interest where you might have a group of people like to do the comedy club thing. I'm just using examples. That's how you, as a master or god or goddess on this path, adjust your circles. So I might only see them people in them times, and then obviously you got your family members, that may not be on this path, but they can be challenging. You got some ignorant ass family members, but you have to be the one that's able to identify who and what those quality people are. So yeah, I want to make that clear. That's a good point. Quality people, the company you keep is important. So you need to determine that quality. I want to make it clear. I'm not saying that everybody in your circle has to be on this path, because that's not going to happen. That's just not a reality. Mm-hmm. Destiny says you're right. Our generation is horrible. No one isn't mature nowadays. No, well, like I say, because when you got that phone at your fingertip, these little kids, like I said, look, they're up against shit we weren't. So let me tell you something, man. I'm not saying that we had it all easy. Well, I'm sure we all went through our trials and tribulations coming up as adolescents, youths, and teens. But man, these kids, they up against some shit we ain't. They gotta take their problems home with them because of this Facebook and Instagram. So whatever bullshit they got going on in school, they bring that shit to the house with them. See, we didn't really have to deal with that. Now, I'm not saying, again, we went through our shit. Don't get me wrong, but these kids, man, they up against that. There's a certain agenda that's being promoted to these kids. And look, I'm not, sexual preference is your preference. I couldn't care. That doesn't affect me. But they're teaching these kids the wrong things, whether it's through music, whether it's through media. And I'm not talking about, I bring up the sexual preference thing is because some of these kids are confused because it's hard for them to identify at an early age what that preference is. Now, we got to be real. When we were young, and back then in them generations, you just certain shit you didn't talk about. But I mean, look at. I mean, you could probably see over a handful of times over the last couple of years where, because of that, people were bullied or teased, and there's been young. I mean, I've never heard in so many years because of bullying and peer pressure and because of sexual orientation where these young kids are committing suicide and killing themselves because they can't deal with the pressures of it. We came up in a generation where a lot of that shit was just not talked about. Now, there's a good side and the upside to that. It was more restricted, where it wasn't so open, where you couldn't really attack individuals like they're being attacked today. But anyway, my point is, long story short, yeah, these kids, they're immature. These millennials, they want everything easy, and then they're dealing with all this other shit that they're dealing with, So it's a whole different era, man. All right, peace, anarchy. We're almost done here. We're about to wrap this up here. We're almost here at the bottom. We're getting there. But yeah, it was good to see you, brother. Hopefully you're able to peek in and out now and then. And take care of that. Take care of yourself. So the military destiny, that's why you get up at 4. Shit. Mine ain't the military. Mine's paper chasing, but I feel you. That discipline. And that's the upside, being in the military. And let me say this, man. And I just had this conversation. Since you bring up the military and Veterans Day just passing, I want to make this clear. And again, I couldn't give a fuck if anybody agrees with it or not. All right. I know there's been over the years, there's a big controversy, especially with Kaepernick and the flag and the military. Look, whether you agree with it or not, man, I respect the military. I respect all those people that serve. You don't have to agree with me. I respect all those people that give their lives. So before you sit there and criticize and get into all your pro-black, anti-government bullshit that were programmed with and indoctrinated, remember there's a lot of good people that, even though they may not have that awareness that you have, there's a lot of good people that put their lives on the line and sacrifice. Because think about this shit. Same thing with the police. Yes, there's corrupt police. Are all police corrupt? No, they're not. Okay, because if you feel like that, when something goes down and your houses get broken into, then don't call the fucking police. All right. If you're that anti-police, either you be anti-police 100% all the way, not 50%, not 60%, because if some shit went down, your ass would be picking up the phone calling 911. All right, let's keep it real. If you're so anti-flag and anti-government, one, and I don't say this, I ain't a Trump supporter. I am a fucking American and I live in America. I don't give a fuck what my ethnicity is and where we came from. Motherfucker, we all here. We all live in America. We're American citizens. And that's the shit that irritates me about motherfuckers. They want to live in America and play African. Well, take it, go back to fucking Africa and play Africa over in Africa. Okay? Your ass lives here now. It's easy for you to pop off at the mouth and talk all this pro-black shit when you ain't dealing with no opposition. Because if you talked half of that shit in those countries over there where the government doesn't allow that religious freedom and spiritual freedom, your ass would, man, you don't even want to know what would happen to you. Trust me when I tell you. All right? So I'm saying this because this conversation came up. I was talking to a brother, and he was on all this Kaepernick shit. And I said, look, let me explain something to you. Yes, when you look at the whole I went over that. There's a video I went over that a couple weeks back. He addressed, I understand his protest, and he addressed it. He wasn't disrespecting the flag. He even went to a Marine who told him that was the peaceful way to protest. And I'm all for that. And I respect each individual has a right to protest and not agree. But I also have a right to take a stance. And I respect what Kaepernick is doing or anybody that feels like that. But don't get mad if I don't take the same fucking stance. When I'm at a sporting event, I remove my hat. I respect the flag. You don't have to agree with that shit. You know why? Because I live in this country. And this country, regardless, I understand the past, right? I love these motherfuckers in 2018 that claim they're suffering from post-stress slavery. What do they call that? Post-traumatic slave disorder. But listen, motherfucker, if you didn't have the shackles on your hands and you wasn't whipped, you ain't suffering from no post. Stop it. It's another fucking crutch that people want to lean on as an excuse. I have to go with, in my time, in my generation, and now, like I say, I'm born and raised, I'm an American citizen, born and raised in this country, though my parents and ancestors might not have been, but I was. You understand what I'm saying? We all grew up in the society. I don't care how much Egyptian robes you put on, African dashikis. I don't care how much you say Hotep or Alafia, your ass lives in America, United States. If you want to be so against that, then take your ass back to these cultures that don't exist no more and think you're going to go back to Egypt and Africa and live like how it was back there. If you don't like that, fuck you. I don't care. Shit is irrelevant to me. I'm going to tell you my stance because I know if these people weren't serving and protecting the country, where would we be? What situation would we be in? Regardless, look, every system's got its problems. I'm not saying it's a perfect system. Nothing's perfect. But I guarantee you go live somewhere else for a while, you're going to realize it's not as bad as here as you thought it was. So I want to make this clear, whether people agree with it or not. And because Veterans Day just passed, and I had this conversation with a brother, and he really didn't like it. He walked away from it knowing that I was firm on my point. He respected it at the end. Wasn't in agreement with it, but that's cool. But I respect the flag. When I'm at an event, I take my hat off. If I see a vet, I thank him for his service. Because you got to stop looking at it like all of them were the problem. Because the thing that now pisses me off where the system is not perfect, like I know vets that have come back from war. My uncle served in the Korean War. Vets have come back from war. And I think personally, vets should get free lifetime health care, right? I think a lot of them are treated like shit for their service. I'm not saying all of them, but some of them are not taken care of. That's where I think the government is at fault. So if you want to protest something, stop worrying about fucking Kaepernick not bowing down to a flag. If you want to be pissed at the government, be pissed at the government for not taking care of some of these vets when they come home. And they don't even have health care. They ain't even got a dollar in their pocket. Shit, you know how many of them has to see on the Lower East Side living on the streets, homeless? That's the reward they get for serving their country, coming back addicted to heroin, living on the fucking streets with no health care. If you want to be mad about some shit, protest that shit. Okay? That's my whole point. Stop being pissed off because Kaepernick decided, and I respect what Kaepernick did. It wasn't the flag he was protesting. Okay? This is where people get it twisted. He was protesting police brutality, okay, on African Americans. Get the shit straight, right? And had nothing to do with the flag. It's crazy ass people like Donald Trump and all. Anyway, let's not get to political thing. We'll be here all night talking about this shit. But you get the point. But having said, despite all that, my stance is I respect people that serve the country. I don't care. You don't have to agree with that. You can get in all the conspiracy theories, blah, 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 blah. Well, if they don't do it, who's going to do it? Because I know I ain't doing it because I'm not interested in doing it. But I respect it. Just like I respect people that are paramedics. I couldn't do that. That's a tough-ass job. Having to be around tragedy all the time, right? To be a paramedic, that's some traumatizing shit. You got to have a certain mindset. I couldn't do that shit. You understand? Because I'd probably get too emotionally invested in that shit. You got to have a certain mindset to go to accidents and see, innocent children in tragedies and shit like that. Come on, man. So before you criticize somebody, think about that for a moment. That's why you ain't got to agree with what anything or what somebody does or does not do. But I have respect for it because I say to myself, if they wasn't doing it, who would be doing it? Because I know my ass wouldn't be doing it. That's not what I was put here for. But people that work in any of those fields of serving, be it the medical, paramedics, the military, police, and I'm telling you because I got cats I went to school with that are police officers now. I have some family that were police officers, and they'll tell you there's corrupt police. So I'm not saying there's not corrupt police, but is every cop corrupt? No. And if you think that, you're fucking stupid. And like I say to that, if that's the case and you're so anti-police, if somebody breaks in your house, don't call 911, motherfucker. That's all I got to say. Okay? Let's keep it real. Keep it moving. Yeah, like when he says, I work with my Irish ancestors. Yes. All right. Good night to you, Destiny. No problem. Good way to end your day. Thank you very much for having my mom and dad. They talk about you all the time, especially mama. Can't wait to see you in December. I really can't wait for the next live video. Well, cool. I'm glad your mom and dad appreciate it. All right, what else we got? Jennifer Long, been Buddhist for over 20 years. I've met many who have gone back to Jesus, but honestly, it shows that they really understood Buddhism when they practice. And that's true. And like I say, key to Buddhism is what? Enlightenment, right? Enlightenment is intellect, right? Knowledge, right? So how does one go from being a Buddhist to a Christian? I would love to ask that person when Anwar Zeb mentioned that. I would just love to understand the thought process because that's like going back 50 steps. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. All right, people, we almost there. I'm going to wrap it up shortly. Just want to make sure I get to all your questions and comments. Okay. Here we go. So it looks like we got Orhan Nance. You speak from a place of privilege because of your skin color. Well, looking at your picture, I wouldn't understand your comment because you look like from your picture that you're white. And this is what I'm talking about, some ignorant asshole that feels because what he's listening to is not in alliance with his personal perspective on things. It's as easy as just leaving the room, or either that we just block you from the room. One or two. I mean, why even stay in a room if you don't agree or not agree? You're not like what you hear. It's as easy as just going to another room. So again, it's not going to change the way I speak, and you're wrong. Don't speak from a place of privilege because of skin color, because you have no idea where I've walked or been through in my life. So that's an ignorant ass statement. And for somebody to say that, I mean, dude, look at yourself. It's completely stupid. And again, Orhan Nance, I will speak on whatever I decide to speak on. Again, as I said before, if you don't like it, leave the room. And like I said, if you continue, we just block you. It's that simple. So you're not going to dictate what I speak on or don't speak on. And that's your personal opinion on a place of ignorance. To you, it's ignorance because you can't connect with it, and that's fine. You're entitled to that. But to you, it's ignorance. Okay? So what else do we got? All right. Well, I would assume. Well, anyway. Guess only says my brother did one tour in Kuwait and one tour in Desert Storm, and was a cop in Seattle, Washington for 7 years. Was never heard. Oh, well, power to him. And see, that's what I was talking about earlier. I see Sonya already deleted and blocked her or whatever. But that's the shit that I'm talking about. An individual staying here, not liking what they're hearing. It's as simple as just leaving and go to another room. Who the fuck is any individual to tell somebody what they can and cannot talk about? That shit is irrelevant to me. I'm going to talk about whatever the fuck I want to talk about. Point blank. If that individual or any other individual in the room don't like it, leave. Go to a room where you hear the shit you want to hear. And who gives a fuck? And here's an individual talking about privilege and skin color. Dude, look at your skin color. What are you talking about? I think, let's see, yeah. But that's the stuff I'm talking about. And remember, like I was saying earlier, when you apply the Luciferian mindset, I'll make this clear. When you utilize the Luciferian mindset, you understand everybody's entitled to their perspective and opinion. So that individual or anybody else is entitled to that. But don't fucking get pissed off when you're not hearing what you think. It's ridiculous. I couldn't give a fuck if you're black, pink, or yellow. You understand? So that shit is irrelevant. Who cares? So what we do is just simply that. There we go. That's all we do. And that's the whole point. Why do you even stay? You waste your own time and energy. But obviously, individuals like that will stay around because, something's being said that strikes their nerve. But anyway, who gives a fuck about that? But we are pretty much down to the bottom of the chat. I don't see any more questions or comments. But if you got any last questions, go ahead and type them in. Real quick, so before we go, I know still some people here for the, again, earlier I mentioned if you did not get the flyer for the event on the 30th, just send me an email. I know everybody that's on the text list and the email list, you did receive it. Should have got it. I think that was, I don't know, Sunday or Monday. Went out a few days ago. The flyers that has the invite on it. If you haven't received that, because I know some people had emailed me. I think 3 people had sent an email. And I responded back to those 3 emails. And those 3 people were not on the email and text list. So I want to make it clear, we will be doing an event on the 30th. The month of December, we will be taking a break. I know, like Sister Mandy said, she will be down there. We will be doing something in a small group, private. So, I mean, you can always contact us if you're in the area. But there won't be like how we send out a monthly flyer, like a public event. There won't be a flyer going out for a ritual in December. So I just want to make that clear. I also, if you came in the room after the fact, in January, we will be doing, again, it's something we did once last year. We're only going to do it once a year, is the ritual of the eternal chaos and darkness ritual. It's an initiation ritual. If you are interested in participating in that in January, there'll be something coming out on that next month to start putting it out there for January. Just contact me and we'll have a brief discussion about that. And that is a lengthy ritual. So we will be doing that in January. And that's something we had talked about doing once a year. And we figured the best time to do that is the beginning of the year, the new year. And the reason for that is it's a new year, new changes. So when you're initiating something and yourself into something, especially something in this particular aspect, it deals with regeneration, change, growth, things of that nature. So that's kind of something we will try to do pretty much the beginning of the year in January. So we're going to do that. That's going to be coming up again. And it'll be the only time for the year. So I would suggest because I know some people, after we did it last year, had sent emails and wanted to know when we were going to do it again, etc. Because it is a lengthy ritual and it takes a little bit of time, it's not something that can be done regularly. So we will offer that every January. So hopefully some of you can come to that. I think it'll be an interesting experience because I know the last one was. So again, we'll take a break in December and then we'll kick it back up in January. So this month's ritual is the Black Mass of the Black Mass and the Eternal Word of Set ritual. And that will be at the end of the month. That'll be on November 30th, which is a Friday, 8:00. So again, if you didn't get the flyer for the invite, you can request the invite by requesting the flyer. And then we will go from there. All right. So what I'm going to do, not sure. Let me just see something real quick. Hold on. Debating whether there's one more area in here I wanted to grade. Not for now. I'm talking about for the next video. Hold on. Debating whether, I think it was energy work. I might have wanted to tap on that. Yeah, I think maybe that'll be the last. I don't know. I'm going to think about it. There's in section 3, starting on page 197, you'll see, if you have the book, they got a section called energy work, meditation, grounding, centering, sensing, breath and look, cleansing, healing, cycling. Possibly flirting with the idea of maybe going through that and finishing with that next week. If not, I might just go to all complete different topic. I'm not going to get into some of the techniques. You can read some of that on your own. In the private classes, we are getting into them. We're going to actually have demonstrations of feeding, absorption. I'm not going to go into it here, but I would suggest you read that. If you have the book, read it on your time. But the energy work part is good because it deals with, especially the cleansing and the healing, the breath and look. Breath is important. Proper breathing techniques, which I think is very, because remember, we always talking about proper meditation. Well, you can't have proper meditation if your breathing techniques aren't in order. That's very important to understand. Well, anyway, I'm gonna think about it. I'll see kind of how it goes, see kind of how I feel. Maybe we'll go through that. If not, if something else pops up, whatever it is, what it is, I'll put the title up there and then we go from there. But other than that, I don't see any more. Well, let me see if there's any more questions. I don't think so. I think we're at the bottom. No. All right, that's it. We got. What else we got? I see Jennifer Long. This ninja just doesn't stop. We call entities like this devil of the sixth heaven those who disrupt the teachers of the law. But yeah, well, like I said, man, it's funny how we talking about that shit tonight, and you get a jackass that comes in, and it's like I say, they'll come here and there, with their stupidness because you're saying things that is not conducive, to their ideology, or you don't fit the description that caters to their blackness, and that's it. And then, like I say, all these keyboard gangsters, they hide behind avatars, they create fake avatars. Making comments with a picture. Knowing he's black and he's got a picture of a white avatar. I mean, it's just stupid little punk shit. But like I say, that comes with the territory. You get them once in a while. But what we do is, like you say, you go into these other chat rooms, and that's their purpose and their goal. Like you're saying, Jennifer Long, to distract from what we're talking about. And rather than get into a nonsensical debate, you ain't talking about anything. You just exit them from the room. Rather than say, what principles you stand on, which they don't. It's probably some pro-black bullshit. Anyway, we get the point. But we'll see. Like I said, we'll see what whatever pops up next week, we'll roll with it. All right. Other than that, I don't see anything else. Look who pops in at 10:47. Boy, you real late. Peace to Bat for Margaret. I don't see any other questions. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. I don't see anything. All right. So I think we will call it a night, people. It's that time, and unless anybody else, I give people another minute. I mean, I'm pretty much going over. I went through everything in the room, so I'll wait another minute or two if anybody's got a question or anything they want to add, and if not, we're gonna wrap it up. I don't see anything. I'll give you guys a minute. All right, peace out. Sister Sonia. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up. I think that's it. I think we covered enough of material. All right. Again, real quick before we leave, that's the book. I would suggest you get the book, and I'll show it a couple of times. The Asetian Bible by Louis Marquez. And again, Barnes & Noble. Don't go on to Amazon, okay, because Amazon's charging an arm and a leg for the book. Get it from Barnes & Noble. It's $25 on Barnes & Noble, all right? Peace. We'll talk next week.